All right. Good evening. It is Thursday, January 6th, 2022. Happy New Year to everybody. We're going to open the first Budget Committee meeting of 2022 with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. This chair just pinched me. All right. So before we get started, we do have a quorum. Go team. So we are going to first have to start with a vote to allow remote attendance because as we can see, we have quite a few people unable to make the in-person meeting today. So I would entertain a vote to allow remote participation in tonight's meeting. Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, going forward, all votes will need to be roll call in order to welcome our remote participants. We will start because as part of the RSA, we need to have an identification. Is it if anybody's in the room with you and reason for being remote? Correct? I think those are the questions. All right, we will start with Mr.
I'll
Cutter.
start. I am remote tonight for medical reasons, and there's nobody here in my office with me this evening.
All right, Mr. Sun.
There's nobody here with me, and I'm remote due to close contact.
Mr. Taylor.
There's nobody in the room with me, and I am out for COVID symptoms without a negative test.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes, I am alone and variants.
Awesome. All right. So we are here. We have our remote people. So
Excellent. Thanks, Carrie. No, I appreciate that. And just by way of motion, given that Carrie, you're in the sitting chair position tonight and remote participation, I figured it'll be easiest for you to chair tonight's meeting. What I'd like to do is make a motion to approve or to nominate Carrie to chair for tonight's meeting.
all right.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So we need to take a roll call vote, starting with Mrs. Harrison.
Yes. Do you want
Yes.
Oh, yes, I will do it. I already agreed. I'm sitting in the chair.
There are two yeses here.
I will. Yes.
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 All right. Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for
Sorry.
your willingness.
Well, I take it for the team, and hopefully you guys are all back and ready next time around. All right, so that brings us to public input. Public input. Would you like to come up?
I would.
All right, please.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. So again, name, the identification for the minutes. That'd be awesome.
Jim Norton, Fort Hotway. So I'm here asking the Budget Committee to have a unanimous vote on Article 2 and Article 4 to show support for our teachers and staff. They've been working under conditions that no one ever thought they would do and are jumping through hoops to get it done. On December 17th, they went above and beyond the call of duty, keeping our kids safe and protected. Our teachers have great relationships with our kids. These relationships were pivotal in getting the info on December 17th to the teachers and the staff. We cannot afford to lose these teachers to other districts. If the board shows a unanimous vote for these articles, the likelihood of it passes increases tremendously. Please show your support by voting yes. Thank you for the time.
So just as a heads up, I am not planning to entertain a vote on those tonight because the committee has not yet seen any information related to either of those contracts. And our bylaws would require us to see the information and then vote at the subsequent meeting, unless there is a vote to suspend the bylaws. But having not seen anything related to the contracts, I would hope we would not receive such a motion. So it would be.
So when would that be voted on?
It would be after the budget hearing next week.
Okay.
So I appreciate it and I would love to, but I can't commit to something I haven't seen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
guys.
Thank you so much.
And just to interrupt, Dr. Jetty, I've not seen that email come through. I'm not sure if it's on its way or.
So actually, I have it open as a tab. I'm gonna have to walk you through it.
Thank you so much.
But I apologize.
Okay.
I actually thought this had been emailed to the committee quite some time ago, so I apologize for that.
Okay. All right. So any other public input? I don't see anybody on the screen, so there will be a second opportunity later in this meeting. Review in addition to the agenda. And are there any changes or recommendations for? Awesome. Correspondence. Mr. Cutter, do you have a list of the correspondence?
Yes, I'm just pulling it up on screen, so hopefully everyone can see that on TV, as well as through the WebEx. I did email this to Mr. Sullivan earlier today as well. For correspondence this evening, we have town budget reports circulated on the 17th, 23rd, and 30th of December. On December 16th, after our committee meeting, there was a recommendation to revise the minutes for December 9th, which were taken and then circulated to the committee. So for tonight, there's two sets of minutes to review, both from December 9th as well as December 16th. On December 23rd, thank you to Town Administrator Brown for the support and publishing the public notice for the budget hearing. That did go into print in the Union Leader on the 27th. On the 27th, I know, Mr. Sun, you sent a notification of remote participation. On January 2nd, there was some email exchange with Mr. Blanchett on the budget hearing broadcast planning, which I did send to the committee earlier today, so everyone's familiar in advance of the setup in the auditorium. On January 4th, Mrs. Douglas' request for contract summaries for support staff and teachers, which was sent over to the school. On January 5th, Mr. Hayes' notification of remote participation this evening. On January 5th, Mr. Izabicki, you had sent an email with the BA report and supporting materials, which was forwarded to the committee. Also yesterday, January 5th, Mr. Taylor, a notification of remote participation. And then earlier today, and these are two updates to the correspondence for Mr. Sullivan that were not on the version that I circulated. We did have the updated town warrant articles circulated by Town Administrator Brown, as well as the school warrant articles, which were sent by Superintendent Jetty.
Awesome.
That covers it.
Thank you very much. All right, so that brings us to the review and the acceptance of the minutes. So if everybody's had an opportunity to review the amended minutes for December 9th, thank you, by the way, for making those changes. Is there a motion to approve as amended? Is there a second? Second. We will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
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 Barca? Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Abstain.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
So the minutes are approved by a vote of 801. Yes, counted that right. All right. Is there a motion has anybody had a chance to review the minutes for December 16th? I'll entertain a motion.
So made.
So made by Mr. Barca, second by Mr. Leary. Roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I was distracted.
For approval of the minutes of December 16th.
Oh, okay. Yes.
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 Mr. Leary. Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Abstain.
All right, those also passed by a vote of 801. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the town business. So, Mr. Brown. I don't know. I was going to go Mr. Troy, but that's not right. Mr. Brown. So typically we see, are there any updates?
So just wanted to revisit where we left off the last time we met, that the budget committee is on record currently of adopting a budget. You had a sort of a preliminary vote of $7,425,719. And we've worked with Chairman Cutter, and we verified that that's where we've left off. Since that time that you took that action, we've had new information that's come in, and the board has made adjustments to the budget, and we didn't take any action on it last time the budget committee met. So I think for you this evening, if you're going to vote to adopt the operating budget, we just wanted to have an opportunity to go through those changes and see if you'd consider accepting some of them or what.
Are they decreases? Because I'll take them.
They're mostly increases, but there's one, but they're offset by one major decrease, which is the fire hydrants.
Yeah, lead with that.
I know.
All right, go ahead.
Bad news first.
Bad news first. All right. So do you want to go by department overall? How would you like to discuss it?
Yeah. So if you're in the budget and you go on the bottom tab, you look at the tax cap,
Mhm.
and you.
And sorry, Troy, I actually have it on screen here too, if you can see
Oh,
that.
good. There you go.
Look at him.
So the first one, advertise. So you can see the budget committee approved. There's the 7,425,000.
Mhm.
That's your last record vote of record. So advertising and regional associations increased $163. That's because we received an updated annual membership fee for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. The fire chief salary line, an increase of $12,128. The selectmen had negotiated a new contract with the fire chief. That resulted in an increase in compensation, but also an increase in hours per week. So we increased his work hours an additional 4 per week. The hydrants, based on the tentative settlement agreement that we have in place right now, the fire hydrant cost would decrease $61,973.
So is it my understanding that the only thing that got negotiated in that was the hydrant fee?
Well, there was in the settlement agreement that we have, the area that was for the town side, the area that we had the most success with really was the fire hydrants. The actual users, the customers, there was really not much traction that was gained at all.
So as a result of those conversations, is there any indication what we can do? Do we need more legal fees to keep going?
Based on our legal counsel and the expert that we had working with legal counsel, both at their recommendation was that there was really nothing more they could do. There was nothing that they could, argue. The numbers, they went through them. They all, what Pinachuk had requested, there were some changes, but there was nothing there that they could argue before the PUC.
All right. Well, my next question then goes before the Board of Selectmen. So go. All right.
EMS Code Red, that's our software that we use when we send out those emergency alert messages. And that's an increase in the software this year for $304. Recreation fields, this was the maintenance contract that we knew at the time we started the work on presenting the budget to the budget committee. This was unfinished work. The rec commission went out to bid, and as anticipated, the cost to maintain the fields increased quite a bit, resulted in a $32,301 increase.
And that's primarily an increase due to labor and materials and not so much a scope.
It's labor, material, no increase really in scope. They did clean up some language to make sure it was clear about some utility type maintenance around some of the fields, around the river access facility and some other rec facilities. I think that's going to be a one-time expense in 2022, but there's definitely discussion with the Conservation Commission and Rec Commission where they've just jointly purchased a tractor. We don't know when we're going to get it, but they probably are going to be taking a look at taking that work over, and that results in about $12,000, but they don't plan on doing it this year. It'll be in 2023.
So what kind of an increase is that reflective of? Like
Last year was about a $50,000. We had about a $50,000 line item for this.
It's over 50% increase. That's
Almost.
I need to get my kid mowing lawns.
And the regular gasoline, we had budgeted 270. I think it was 275 or it was 275. And, we put the budget together in August. We were carrying 275 a gallon. we have now adjusted it to $3 a gallon. And that resulted in the $4,395 increase, which when you do your additions and subtractions, it brings a bottom line of $7,413,037. Looks like that's a reduction from where you folks did your preliminary approval of $12,682.
All right. So I guess the question is, do we accept them as a total bottom line, or do we go by individual accounts?
I'll make a motion to accept the bottom line.
All right.
That's
Second.
Made and seconded. I like it. All right. So we will be voting on accepting these adjustments, and they will go where they go. Roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison. Mr. Leary.
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Barca. All right. Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right. These adjustments have been accepted by a vote of 900. Excellent. All right. So now
Can I
our
ask a
numbers.
question to Mr. Brown?
Sure.
Mr. Brown, you had mentioned that in the fire chief's contract, there was an additional hours that is built into that increase. How does that impact current overtime? Would there be less need for overtime because the fire chief is contracted for more hours?
He doesn't get overtime.
Yeah, so he doesn't receive overtime pay, and his additional hours that he'd be working per week wouldn't have any impact on the overtime that's paid out for the 2 full-time firefighters. So the answer to your question is no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? All right. Hearing none. So.
Troy, a question on Article 4, which is the spirit of what we're talking about here, right? And the operating budget now approved of $7,413,037. Has the Board of Selectmen taken action on this article?
So they have gone through, when really we're kind of in the process where we've made these adjustments. Have they come back and officially been on record of adopting the bottom line? They have, of the 7,413, I guess.
Yeah, we did.
So the adjustments that the budget committee, has made through the process, that there isn't any disagreement with them between the budget committee and the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, so in terms of voting though, is this a 5-0-0 vote on Article 4?
Yeah,
It's
that's
still
the
showing a
last
0-0, so-
vote was the bottom line, that 7,413. So when they made that motion, they accepted all the budget committee changes as well.
Okay, so that's a 5-0-0, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So are there any other changes that we would like to make to the operating budget before we officially go into Article 4? Those are all your updates? All right.
Just did.
For the operating budget, yep.
Excellent. So looking at the town warrant articles, 1, 2, and 3 are zoning. 1's election, 2 is zoning, 3 is zoning, and however many else they come up with. So Article 4, all right. I think I saw there were quite a few listed for the thing. So I'm not even sure we're going to make it 4. We might be further down the list. So I asked a motion to recommend.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4.
Okay, Mr. Barkham has a motion to recommend.
Second.
Mr. Leary seconds. Roll call vote. Any other discussion?
I had a question about the estimated tax rate impact.
Go ahead.
What is the estimated tax rate?
It's probably not 0.00.
Really?
That's what I'm thinking.
Article 4?
Yeah.
It's not
Let
that
me
true.
get back to the,
And then how does
budget.
that, I've got the tax cap in the back of my mind.
0.07.
We're under the tax cap.
7 cents it says.
The only thing with
I
all the
hope.
warrants that put us over, or would put us over, is the fire engine.
Sorry.
No, that's
No,
okay.
it's good.
Yeah,
We-
it's
we
not gonna be.
should-
I have the old one.
Oh, you know what though? I'm gonna have to, because we have to go back and look at, it's not as simple as doing the direct,
Mhm.
we have to go back and look at last year's number and do the delta and stuff.
Mhm.
So I'll go back and do that.
It'll be greater than 0.
It would be less than 7 cents because that's what it is. It's
Okay.
higher number,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Less than
Yeah,
nine.
Troy, if we can connect maybe tomorrow or early next week, because I'd like to have that information for the budget hearing next week.
Awesome. Now, however, that shouldn't change whether or not people feel that that's the right amount to fund this town. So if everybody's comfortable, can you give the vote? Any other questions? All right, Mrs. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Barca?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
All right, that budget is approved, recommended by a vote of 9-0-0. And I honestly think that is a first in my 8 budgets we've done so far. So congratulations, team.
Yeah. And just so you know, I know that you had two questions. One, what was the tax impact, which we couldn't answer. But the budget you just approved is 72,165 below tax cap.
All right, and that is what gets factored into the next discussions as we move forward. All right, because the next one is number 5, Human Services and Health Agencies. Do you want me to read them, or do you want to? I can read them.
Madam Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
I'm going to share just a summary here, and what I'm sharing is actually the draft version of the budget hearing deck that I've started to put together. And I just want to make sure that the committee is aligned on voting for the remaining articles on the town side and the impact given the consideration of the tax cap. And this is also on the town drive sheet. So thank you, Mr. Brown, for keeping that updated. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So the operating budget of $7,413,000 was committee approved just a moment ago. And as Town Administrator Brown represented, that's $72,000 under the tax cap. Should the committee decide to recommend Article 5, Article 6, Article 7, Article 8, it has these impacts to the tax cap. So as a committee, we can recommend and still be under the tax cap per the RSA, Articles 5 through 8. We would not be able to recommend Article 9, given the impact to the tax cap and being over.
The reality is we can't recommend it no matter what you do, though, right? So, well, unless we go back and reduce $72,000, but
I just wanted to make sure everyone had the information. Thank you.
I want to vote yes on 9, like really badly.
So like, are 4 of us allowed to vote yes on 9? How does that work?
We cannot.
can't-
Well,
no one can
the
vote on it?
overall recommendation cannot be positive, so you could have a 4 or 5 vote.
You can recommend the budget.
Right, but a 4 or 5 is, if we say we're voting to recommend, well, not, we always get this wording crazy. Or vote to-
You could have a 4-4-1 and it would still be a not recommended.
Right. All right, well, we can deal with that. Well, but again, the reality is that's what budget hearings for. That's what, well, we can't do that. It has to be, it's suspended at deliberative. If you want to suspend the tax cap, it gets to, but
That would be,
PR,
that
like,
would also be by the voters voting for it.
right, but we're still locked into, yeah. But the reality is, that one's hopefully an easy sell. Like, but hopefully people understand why it can't be recommended by the budget committee, and it should be, look, this is where our equipment is. But, so, has everybody had a chance to digest Mr. Cutter's information, because it's going to impact voting as we go forward? All right. So Article 5, Human Services and Health Agencies. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $21,255 to support human services and health agencies providing services to the town of Litchfield? Estimated tax impact, 2 cents. With a link to additional information, but I have paper, so I'm not going to click. So
Motion to recommend.
there is a motion to recommend. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
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 Mr. Barker. All right, Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right, that passed. That is going to be recommended by the Budget Committee of 900. Article 6, full-time highway position. We still have room for this one, right?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
Oh, no. Let's choose between this one and the next one, don't I? All right.
No.
There's a room for both. Oh, there's room
Yes,
for both.
there
of them.
is.
Okay. Shall the town vote to establish a full-time highway position effective July 1st, 2022 for an annual estimated wage, benefit and other related costs of $85,607, and further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $41,736 for wages, benefits, and other related costs for the period of July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Estimated 2022 tax rate impact 3 cents. All right. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to recommend.
So, all right, there's a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Leary seconds. Discussion? Ms. Brown, anything you would like to add before we vote? I think this past weekend demonstrated the need for this. I'm glad he's okay. But it probably would have been
The driver was fine, the truck's fine, the sander salter,
not so fine.
the straps, they did their job, they released, and the sander salter took the brunt of the damage, so.
Right. But it would have been handy to have an extra guy out there while kids are getting ready to come home from school.
We had one person.
Right.
when that.
I'd like to add to that, since you're talking about the safety factor, is that it was a few weeks ago, probably about a month and a half ago. There's a creek on Colby Road that had flooded, and it was literally washing out the street. And Kevin and his assistant Josh were up there, and I stopped in. Kevin was in the backhoe, Josh was on the street. But because I had stopped to see my brother at Tim's Turf, I walked up to say hello, and I was literally afraid for Josh standing on the side of the road because cars were going by at a pretty good clip. So short of hiring a flagger or a policeman, I mean, having a third person to at least be out there with, the markers. I mean, I think this is imperative that we bring this forward for safety's sake. We don't want someone getting hurt.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad that it was okay on both accounts. All right. Roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
I am a yes.
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 Too fast. Mr.
Yes.
Cutter. All right. Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right. So this will appear with a recommendation of 900. I forgot it was the grants. It's 0 next year or whatever it is. That's how. All right. So Article 7, full-time school resource office police officer position. Shall the town vote to change the part-time school resource police officer position to a full-time position effective July 1st, 2022 at an estimated annual increase in wages, paid benefits, and other related costs of $41,067, and further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $0 for wages, benefits, and other related costs for the period of July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Estimated tax rate impact, 2022 tax rate impact is 0. That's why I got messed up there.
Make a motion to recommend.
All right, there's a motion to recommend. Mr. Leary seconds.
Second.
Good, Mr. Sun.
All right, Mr. Sun seconds. Any further discussion?
Thanks, Mr. Leary.
Any further discussion?
I think
I'd like to thank Chief Sergeant, right, for his passionate explanation on the need for this SRO a few weeks ago. Very articulate, really supported the need and justification in my mind.
Yeah. And if
Go
you
ahead.
don't mind,
Nope.
I'd like to add that the school board fully supports this position. I think the events of December 17th made it abundantly clear that we could use another police presence in our schools.
I would like to see a resource officer in all 3 of the schools. I think it's a deterrent, and I think it's kind of a neat thing for the kids to be able to go up and talk to a policeman and know that they're safe. Same thing for their families. It's just, I think this is well warranted, and I hope that people support it.
Thank you.
I do encourage Chief Sergeant to come there because like I said last time, I was, I'm not so sure we need this. Now I'm like, vote now. I'm good. Let's go. So he did. I really appreciated your presentation that addressed all my concerns and questions, and I hope we see him there and that you don't sign up to sell any other warrant articles because I'll be broke. So, so we will take our roll call vote on this one. Mrs. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm not used to saying your name anymore, so I'm like, I know it. Like, Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Wholeheartedly a yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Sun?
100% yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Awesome. This will also appear with a recommendation of 9-0-0.
Mrs. Douglas, meet Mrs.
Mrs.
Stevens.
Stevens.
Mrs.
Yeah,
Stevens,
Stevens.
Mrs. Douglas.
Honestly, I rarely get called. I always call people by their first name. So I'm like, I know it. And I can't recall it. I don't even have my kids in Cub Scouts call me by my last name.
Here you go.
My mother. All right. So part-time clerk, Article 8. Shall the town vote to establish a part-time clerk to assist the town clerk tax collector effective July 1st, 2022. This position would be assigned to a 20-hour work week with no paid benefits and an estimated annual wage and other related costs of $18,323, and further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $9,144 for wages and other related costs for the period of July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Estimated 2022 tax rate impact is 1 cent. So this was recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 401. So I'd be curious who abstained.
Richard LaSalle abstained, didn't state why.
Okay.
I think hasn't his wife helped out in the office?
His wife has volunteered to work in the office and maybe he did not state why. And
Well, I appreciate the extreme sense of no conflict of interest. So I appreciate his care in that.
And this isn't replacing a position. This is adding the position, right? Because I know
Yep.
you had talked about
So-
having 2 part-timers, but
Right.
this
So
is
the
just
department is
additional.
currently staffed with the elected full-time position, the
Yeah.
town clerk, tax collector, a full-time deputy town clerk, tax collector, and a part-time clerk. So this would establish another part-time clerk.
Okay. Thank you.
And are all positions filled right now, or are we hiring for another position right now?
So unfortunately, the department over the last couple of years has had some turnover. And so right now, our deputy town clerk, tax collector position is vacant. We just have our town clerk and our part-time clerk. And it's a good example of why this position, bringing a part-time clerk on, it's a way to provide backup staff to the department at a very low cost with no benefits. And when we find ourselves in this situation, the vacancy, it would be key to have a part-time person already trained on the sidelines to be able to step in.
And I think we ran into something last year or the year before where that spot was vacant or it became vacant, and one person that was supposed to go on vacation had to cancel to fill in the office. So it would be a buffer against that too, because it's pretty sad if you got to cancel plans and you don't know if you get your money back or
We're
whatever.
gonna vote no, and now somebody's losing vacation.
Tugging at our heartstrings.
I don't have a heart. Come
I
on.
was gonna say I wasn't sure you had heartstrings there, Carrie.
I'm from New York. We're cold-hearted. All right. So is there a motion? Did we make a motion? I totally forgot.
I make a motion to
All
recommend.
right. Motion to recommend.
Second.
Mr. Leary, seconds. All right. Roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison.
Yep.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
I'm a yes. I cannot believe this. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Right, again, recommended by a vote of 9-0-0. Wow, people are gonna wonder what you guys put in our water. Let's see. All right, now this is the one I'd love to vote for. Article 9, fire engine lease purchase. Capital improvement plan Plan Action Year 2022, replace 1995 fire engine. Shall the town vote to authorize the selectmen to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement for the sum of $703,984 for the purpose of lease purchasing a fire engine with equipment and attachments for the fire department, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $147,948 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause. Estimated tax rate impact 12 cents. If you go online, you can click additional information. So this changed from 7 to 5, correct?
So since the last time you saw this article, even though the board, the budget committee did not take a position on it, some of the discussion we had, Selectman Leary and I brought it back to the board, and we did change it from a 7-year to a 5-year lease. We had a discussion about whether or not we wanted the payment to be made in 2022 or the option of deferring the payment till 2023, with the justification that we know the truck will not be in service in 2022. But in the end, the Board of Selectmen felt that really, if we're going to address the aging fleet in this department, it is best to do a 5-year lease and start making those payments and really allowing the citizens to decide if they want to purchase this or not. If it's approved, the plan is that when this is paid off, it's going to be time to now lease purchase another engine. And hopefully, that'll be a 5-year lease, and the fire department can try to get back on that cycle of every 5 years lease purchasing a new piece of equipment.
I am so thankful to see this. I have been asking and encouraging and advocating for such a plan for years. So thank you. Thank you, Board of Selectmen, for getting us back to this, because my understanding is we used to have it. A former chief did a wonderful thing, saved us some money, but then we got off the leasing program. So now it's, unfortunately, it hurts, but it's time to get back to that as responsible leaders of our town, making sure that we have the equipment we need to do the job we expect our guys to do.
I fully support the lease purchase of the fire engine. I understand it's, absolutely necessary. We cannot recommend it because it exceeds the tax cap, but I would encourage, hopefully the Board of Selectmen and the town can find ways to fund it alternatively as well. I know we have a lot of infrastructure grants coming in, and if we can reduce the load on the taxpayer, I know I don't want to artificially lower it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to keep the tax rate consistent so we don't see spikes and valleys, but I would really...
Hopefully next year we'll see a warrant article to use grant money to offset the lease payment or something. So who knows? But
yeah, that would be, if we can do it, I think that's a great way to do
but
it.
either way, we just need to get back on. Bite the bullet.
Make a motion to recommend. Maybe.
Well, two things about this. Number one is by putting it to 5 years, I think it saves us $35,000
I saw
somewhere in
that.
that neighborhood. So that's why we decided to do that.
Makes sense.
And for the board, personally, some of us aren't really crazy about this at this point yet, but we decided it was time that it goes to the voters and let the voters decide. So a lot of people put personal feelings aside and put this forward.
Well, this was recommended 5-0. So
Yeah, but you have to recommend it or else it would be.
No, but you guys recommended it. So that means you guys, I appreciate you guys having that discussion and just coming to a consensus. I appreciate that you guys went with a shorter number. That it seems insignificant, but the reality is that's a position, right? So the amount that we've saved on this is money that can be used and freed up for other purposes. And I hate paying interest anyway, so I appreciate using taxpayer money more efficiently and effectively. So we have a motion to recommend.
Second.
All right, Ms. Stevens will second. I guess we can draw straws as to who gets to vote yes. We need.
Are we gonna try and do 441, or what are we gonna try and do? Or do we have to do 09 or what?
It just can't pass.
Okay.
So my understanding is a 4-5 vote is not recommend.
Yeah.
That's correct.
441 is also.
Are we still doing discussion on this article?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I'd just like to make a comment that if this particular fire truck is that important to bring forth an amount that would exceed the tax cap, knowing that it would not pass, I'm a little disappointed that then, basically, instead of trying to tighten the belt or even just reduce the amount of the overall budget so that it could have been Article 9 or Articles 5 through 8 to at least give us a choice. I feel like this is just kind of circumventing the system that, you know what, fine, the budget committee can't vote for it, but the voters will go ahead and vote for it. And that's a way to cheat to get over the tax cap instead of, really looking hard at it to try to see if you can get it to fit in the budget. I mean, it's in the CIP plan, so everybody knew it was coming.
Well, I don't think it's circumventing the budget. This would represent 10% of the budget. Some of the money in the budget increases is due to contracts, people's salaries. There's not a lot of fat in the budget. So I would disagree with that it's circumventing the budget.
It could cost zero and people could still vote no. So, I mean, the voters ultimately are the ones who decide
Yes.
whether or not they feel it's an appropriate expenditure. But we could vote. So I see your point of view and I understand it, but I don't know what else we can't vote to recommend it anyway.
Are we allowed to just not vote and just leave it 0, or do we have to? Because
We
as
are
a,
required
because as a
to
budgetary impact, we have to vote, right?
We are required to have a recommendation on the ballot.
If I could just follow up on that comment, we did have discussion about, let's face it, I think the operating budget, we have a budget to put together to deliver services for 12 months. The budget itself, along with all the warrant articles, are subject to a $175,000 tax cap. So right out of the gate, trying to pay a lease payment of $147,000 is pretty much your tax cap. The articles prior to this are just, they're important too. We're trying to look at the whole picture. So the only other option we had was that we could have worded this article that we had paid the first year's payment with the use of the unassigned fund balance, or we structured the financing so the first payment wouldn't come to 2023. If we had done either one of those, it would allow, there'd be no tax impact, and it would allow the budget committee to take a vote to support or not. But we felt that we've heard comments in the past about if we did structure the financing that way, that the discussion about the need of the fire engine would focus around the selectmen trying to circumvent the tax cap. And we didn't want that debate. We want the debate to be whether it's needed or not.
And I appreciate that on the back of the conversations and discussions we had last year about the radio tower. I mean, it hurts. It's not inexpensive, and goodness knows I don't want to pay a huge increase in my taxes. But at least, like you said, there's an honest discussion about it. Let's have it. We've needed to have this discussion for a long time. Like, we've needed to get back into this. So it's time to have a discussion. If people don't support it, then they can vote no. I hope they vote yes, but they have the right to vote no.
And in the long term, if it's approved and we stick to the 5-year leasing plan, then it becomes part of the operating, it becomes part of that ongoing expense. So
Like the fire truck, like the police cars.
the lease payment, yeah. I mean, obviously, 5 years from now, if you're going to buy a new fire engine, there needs to be a warrant article to get that permission. But the annual cost, hopefully, it'd be about the same. I'm sure everything goes up, but
I'm sure we'll have a discussion in 5 years. Don't worry.
And the other thing with this too is we had discussion about if this is approved by the voters, when this is paid off, that money goes back to the people. It doesn't stay in the budget.
But
So
but
that's
I
something
thought we
else
talked about there was going to be, and then we purchase another. We
We
do
just
another
said
You have to
5-year
put it
lease.
another
before the
warrant.
voters again.
Another warrant.
it would be a warrant article, but at
Yeah.
least, you'd have that final payment made, and then you would ask the voters, now, can we go lease purchase a new engine?
Be a nice slide in the slide.
Hopefully, maybe the lease payment is somewhere close to the 147. So there's
Plus
little
5 years
impact.
inflation.
We don't have that roller coaster
Mhm.
ride.
I think it's a very wise way of doing it.
It was explained to me that once you get it in the budget, then it's there and you can just automatically buy a new vehicle. And I said, no, you can't. It's got to go to the voters. It's $750,000. It needs to go to the voters. It needs to come out of the budget and then go back in if the voters say yes.
And the reality is, if we get on the schedule, that's a slide in the slide deck says we've terminated the lease. We now own it. Now, instead of being 0, we continue it for the next lease. It's
If you want to continue that line item and the
Right.
voters say yes, correct. Yeah.
Yep. For whoever gets to do those presentations
Mhm.
at that time. So we have a recommendation and a second. We were going to do the roll call. Is there any other discussion related to this warrant article? Hearing none.
Do we want to do like every other yes, no? something like that?
Or the first few people who vote get to say yes? I don't know. Well, I will vote no because I have a loud mouth and have no problem saying yes.
Start with the people on the screen.
Oh, you want me to start with people on the screen? All right, we'll start with people on the screen. Mr. Cutter,
It counts.
I am a no.
Mr. Hayes,
I am a no.
Mr. Sun,
No.
Mr. Taylor,
No.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
I will be a no. Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrison.
No.
So was that's six,
Three.
threes,
Six.
no,
3,
6, 0. So
6.
it is not recommended. Voted. How is the wording on
We'll
that?
say not recommended.
Not recommended.
Not recommended by the budget committee.
3, 6, 0.
Oh, give that backwards.
Could be- 3 people are in favor of it, 6 are against. Make it work.
Is that how it goes? Not recommended 6-3?
Not recommended.
6.
Yeah.
6
flip.
not recommended.
Yeah.
3 recommended.
That's confusing.
It is confusing.
Yeah, I would word it 360.
I think that's.
That's
what I would do too.
Yeah.
Not
I
recommended.
think I'll go back to some emails. We have legal counsel.
I seem to remember we had to have a
We've
vote.
had this discussion before.
So I think in the past, didn't we have to we had to make a motion to not recommend by a vote of.
It's not recommended by the budget committee by 6 people.
They always
Not
vote to recommend
recommended.
and just voted
3
against.
3 did.
That's what I thought too.
We have this discussion every year, and I always like,
Just hopefully.
All right.
you know what? We see what it looks like
Yeah.
next week, and we can
Yeah.
always change it afterward. The budget.
Legally figure it out.
I do think we have some legal advice
I think
on
we
this
did too.
subject matter before. So
I know.
I could be wrong, but
I
we'll see.
I
I'll see what I
remember
can
this
dig up.
conversation going on.
We have it
every
from last year, Troy.
Yeah.
So what?
Am I wrong?
Article 10.
Who just said that?
That was Cutter, I believe.
Yep.
All right. So we would love to, but we can't. That's that one. Article 10. Property value revaluation expendable trust fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in the property revaluation expendable trust fund established in 2021? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated tax rate impact is $0. Recommended
Motion
by
to recommend.
Oh, there was recommended by the Board of Selectmen by 410. I guess one question I would have, like, why is there a vote against it?
That would be me.
Well. All right, I guess we can make a recommendation that we can discuss. So,
I need a motion.
Second.
I think Cutter made a motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
So Barker can get the second. All right, I would love to hear the concerns that the Board of Selectmen had as to why this is not a unanimous vote.
I'm just not personally satisfied with our company that we have, so.
Okay.
Is it the same one, Avatar or whatever it's called? Yeah.
So it's nothing to do with the philosophy, it's with who's getting paid? Okay.
Yeah.
The cost.
And I wanted us to put it out to bid and
Okay.
whatever, but.
Right.
And I got shut down by my board.
So, but Mr. Brown can explain the purpose of this for those who are watching, because most of us know, but
Yeah, sure. The revaluation expendable trust fund was created last year, and the purpose of the fund is to set aside $25,000 for the next 4 years. The first year, we've already accomplished that. And that way, when we hit our update year, we'll have $100,000 available in the fund, and we won't have to, increase the operating budget $100,000 to cover that cost. So we had a strange way of funding this cost in prior operating
yeah, I
budgets.
thought it was in budgets in the past.
It was in the operating budget, and I just really didn't like the way it was done.
What's there 25,000 in the operating budget every
No,
year?
we used to raise like,
Okay,
It was 100,000 when it was due, right?
we used to raise like
so every 4 years it went up 100,000, went back down.
$60,000,
That's
and then
kinda
the
weird.
last year we'd spike it up, and
Mhm.
this is this is why we established the fund. This is the correct way to fund the revaluation. Most towns have a revaluation expendable trust fund. They put money away. In the 5th year, they have the money available.
What happens if people vote no? Do we not get our houses revaluated?
Then it's just
Is-
$25,000 doesn't get
Right.
appropriated, and the fund doesn't go away. We just have $25,000
But
there.
the
sitting
fine
there.
later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're paying for it one way or another.
Yeah.
I don't know. The last revaluation hurt pretty bad. I'm not sure I want you coming around again, but the reality is the proper way to do it is to spread it out over the period of the 5 years.
Instead of trying to spread it out in the operating budget,
Mhm.
when you're trying to fund something that's not a true expense for the 12 months, I don't think that's proper budget.
Right. No, but I do agree that you don't want to spike it at the end.
Right.
So to slice it up annually, I think is to straight line your budget is a good idea. So was there a recommendation?
Andrew did.
Andrew,
Second.
who's second?
Yep, the recommendation is mine.
All right. So roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
No.
I'm a yes. Miss Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
No.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
No.
Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right. So that will be recommended by a vote of 7-2.
Can we recommend it?
I'm sorry.
I thought we can't recommend
There's
it.
no tax rate.
Oh, there's no
No
tax
tax
impact?
rate.
No
Okay.
tax.
Was it 72 or 63?
I think it was 630.
All right. You're right. 1, 2, 3, 630. So
The rest of them have no tax impact.
right, but it's using. Well, that's always the. Well, it has no tax rate impact, but it does. But
New
right.
taxation.
right.
We had to change that. Well, we changed it.
I don't know. It says here recommended by budget committee. I'm voting unless you guys decide we don't want to. Article 11, technology and communication expendable trust fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $12,000 to be placed in the technology and communication expendable trust fund as previously established? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2022 tax rate impact is 0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 500. Current balance 38,000. Goal to get to 50. Any questions or discussion?
And 50 was the amount when it was established. 50 was the amount.
Ultimately, isn't
That
this
was
just
created.
restoring what you had to spend for other purposes?
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing
Mr.
none.
Brown, when was it established at 50,000? What year?
When the fund was created, it was established at 50,000.
It was based on like a UPS.
Right, but what year was it established?
I think this article, this fund is maybe 2 years old.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't remember. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to recommend by Mr. Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr.
Second.
Barca? All right. Roll call vote. Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
No.
All right, recommended by a vote of 8-1-0. Thank you. Article 12. Oh, we're getting there. Fire vehicle and equipment repair expendable trust fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in the fire vehicle and equipment repair expendable trust fund as previously established? This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2022 tax rate impact is 0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 4-1-0. Current balance 51,000. Goal to get to 75.
Motion to recommend.
All right, there's a motion to recommend. Ms. Stevens seconds. Discussion.
It wasn't me.
I can't remember that one, actually.
I do. Yeah. It was a discussion about, we already have a line for maintenance, vehicle maintenance in the budget.
Mm.
It seemed redundant, but
You're probably gonna need the 75 if the fire truck doesn't pass. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the concern was there's some pretty expensive, if something goes, it's
Yeah,
not
something
cheap.
goes,
Yeah.
you know,
And
Didn't he say water pump was like $30,000?
it can be, and if you add up, it can be more. So
I'm sure nowadays it's even more than that. So any further discussion?
it's important because if the fire engine doesn't pass, then they need the money for their repairs.
Well, we also have a lot of older equipment anyway. So,
Yes. Yeah.
so there you go. We need new equipment so we don't need such a big balance. Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
No.
Mr. Hayes,
No.
Mr. Stein,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
All right, so that is recommended by a vote of 630. See, I counted that time. Which goes up here. All right, Article 13, Public Works Expendable Trust Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $80,000 for deposit into the Public Works Expendable Trust Fund as previously established? The sum to come from the unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated 2022 tax rate impact is 0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 500. Current balance, almost 21,000. Goal to get to 100,000. Discussion or recommendation vote? Either way.
Move to recommend.
Mr. Leary votes to makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Barca seconds. Discussion?
So is this also, this is just for the repair of the highway vehicles? Is that
So
right?
it's when you go back to when the fund was created, it can be used for our solid waste facility and equipment there. Any overages in our C&D and the household waste. So if for any reason the costs go through the roof, we can use this fund to help offset those costs.
Salt and stuff too?
And for salt, for our snowplow contractors, so if you have a really bad winter and we exceed our budget, we can also use this for replacing our vehicles. We can buy a new vehicle for the highway department. So the goal here is trying to get this thing. One, we're recognizing that the fleet at the highway garage, although we're making progress replacing some of the trucks, we still have a very old fleet. Two of the heavy duty trucks, which are I think a 1999 and a year 2001 International plow truck. Those are well over 20 years old. Those are out of service right now, and those are the big trucks, the typical trucks you see the state driving. The orange trucks. They're broken down now. One will never be repaired.
Oh.
So we are kind of trying to see if we could buy a couple used heavy duty trucks, and working with the neighboring communities. If they have a good truck that they're kind of taking off their schedule, we'd like to explore that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you see us trying to get this fund up to the 100,000. So if we do make a purchase, we still have some funds available if we have other problems during the operations.
So has this been slowly depleted over the years, or did we actually spend this much last year?
It has. We lost. I think we did
Down
make
to
we
80,000.
lost a truck, or not. But we had an expensive repair. I think to two of those old trucks that now probably aren't going to be in service. The balance has been, off the top of my head, somewhere right around 25,000 for a long time. This is an old fund, and nobody's really addressed it. So I'm hopeful that
So it was 25,000 when we
a
had a younger
long
fleet.
time, way back when it was established, I believe. Yeah.
Now this can be used for emergency road repairs and things like that as well. Important to know.
Hey, I'm not sure about the emergency road repair. I'd have to go back and look at the language.
But we discussed that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The contingency fund for public works. So we had a motion.
Someone made a motion. I forget who.
No, we don't. We need a motion. All right.
Yeah.
I tend to.
It's a motion in a second.
All right. So roll call vote. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
No.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
All right, at least I kept track of that. Recommended by a vote of 7-0. All right. All right, Conservation Fund Cap Amendment. Shall the town vote to amend the 2014 vote regarding the deposit of land use change tax funds into the Conservation Fund to allow the balance of the fund to accumulate up to 2.5 million? The current limit is 1 million. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen by a vote of 5-0. Conservation Commission does not seem to have taken a vote yet, and they're
And-
currently about to hit that limit.
And you won't need to take a vote on this because it doesn't raise and appropriate any funds.
Oh, look at that! No budget committee.
So, yeah, it's good for you to know about it, but yeah, it does not raise and appropriate funds. So
Excellent.
budget committee takes no action.
Yes. Are we voting? Oh, we have to vote. See, that's what it is. It's like all over. All right, next one we're supposed to vote on. Gotcha. Article 15, Farmland Capital Reserve Fund. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $35,408.71? Really? To be placed in the Farmland Capital Reserve Fund as previously established. The sum is to come from the Land Use Change Tax Fund as previously established, which represent land use change tax revenue received as of December 31st, 2021, but not transferred to the Conservation Fund in accordance with the $1 million cap established in 2014. No amount to be raised from new taxation. Estimated tax rate impact is $0. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0. No vote by Conservation Commission. There is a line for the Budget Committee, so we can take a look at that.
Oh, motion to recommend.
All right.
Second.
All right. Motion and second. Discussion. Is there any?
If Article 14 does not pass, this fund is important because they can't exceed their $1 million cap. So there's got to be a place to put the money and not have it go to the general fund or something like that.
So,
why?
Long term,
That's a good point. I mean, yeah. So 14 does not pass. So the way the Article 14, when they had this article and they said, we're going to put $1 million cap on it. And if funds are collected above the million, it is to be put aside and held there until the next, vote is taken. If no vote's taken, then the funds just lapse to the unassigned fund balance. So the action here is we're just going to ask if we could take the money that was collected above the million, put it in the Farmland Capital Reserve Fund, and not tie it to the Conservation Fund in case something.
My question was on the raise and appropriate the sum.
Yep.
Is
Your
that
money's
because
already
it
there.
comes?
We have, that's why there's no tax impact, but we do need to raise and appropriate it, even though it's.
Okay.
They've,
was just a
they've
non-
exceeded their cap.
it's
So that
expense
money
on
is
one
sitting in
side,
limbo.
revenue on the other side, and zeros
Okay.
out.
All right. I just was,
Yeah.
So my question.
So the money is set aside.
Yep.
And it's there. If it's not appropriate, so you have to raise and appropriate it to move it or spend it somehow. If no action is taken, it just lapses and goes to the unassigned fund balance.
So my question is, if 14 does pass, are we now going to have two funds and with one that's eventually going to be closed?
You have two funds now anyhow. We have a conservation fund and we have this Farmland Capital Reserve Fund.
Okay.
It's an old fund that was established.
Is there anything in it now?
Yeah. What's
There's
the,
$125,000 in there now. So part of the conversation with the conservation fund when they, were looking at a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen was that they felt, one, they didn't want to tie it to the conservation fund because we don't know what the outcome of that vote's going to be. And two, if we could put it in the Farmland Protection Fund, then the two funds could possibly be used to leverage federal and state
Talking about
grant
two
funds.
revenue
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah.
if you can show two pots of money coming locally
Oh, right. I
and
know
try to
that.
leverage state money and federal money, it helps that grant application.
Right,
And
'cause
I tell you,
Board of Selectmen's
land
one-
preservation grant applications are extremely competitive.
right. Because it had to do with Conservation Committee's agents on one and Board of Selectmen's agents on the
Selectmen,
others. So then,
So you can actually put the grant application, the selectmen agree to
Right.
use this fund, the conservation commissions are agreeing to use this. And it looks like a great effort by all here in Litchfield, which it is, and that's how the state decides, well, we're willing to participate too.
oh, that's clearly everybody agrees. So you're not ticking off somebody. Awesome. So we have a motion on this one. So are there any other discussion? Anyone on the screen have any questions? All right, hearing none. Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
No.
All right, so that will be recommended by a vote of 8-1-0. I believe that is the last one, but
You
we
don't-
can discuss it.
There is a petition warrant article that
We
came
can
in as well.
discuss it, but
So there is an Article 16.
yes, I see
You
that,
won't,
but
you
there's
won't,
no
because
vote.
it, so you can go over it. I
Right,
think you should
so-
go over it, but.
Article 16 is a petition warrant article to see if the town will vote to increase the veterans tax credit and the all veterans tax credit from $500 to $750 per year. Note, assuming that the same number of eligible recipients, 400, this will cost an additional $100,000 with an estimated 2022 tax rate impact of 8 cents. And there has been no vote yet by the Board of Selectmen. Based on what I read. Yeah. So there is no need necessary for the budget committee to vote on it, as there is no. Well, we didn't vote on the last one.
And you didn't vote on the last one because you were not raising and appropriating
Right.
any funds.
It's a redistribution.
Can I ask a clarifying question on this? Didn't we vote last year on the solar article that it wasn't a raise and appropriation, but it was similar in that it had a tax impact with it? Did we not vote on that one?
I don't know
I
that we
would not
did.
believe, I would not think that you would. That was a credit.
We voted on the one in the year prior because I remember that
To assess solar.
Well, there was one. No, we have in the past. But last year, I don't believe we did vote on them, but we have.
I
in
have the
past.
budget, I have the budget hearing materials that were presented, Article 13, solar exemption, the board, the committee did not vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's not raising it doesn't change how much is being taxed. It just changes how it's allocated to the taxpayers.
Is this the same group that petitioned to increase the tax credit? Was it last year? Or 2 years
It's
ago?
the veterans.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And they were upfront, they were working with the Board of Selectmen. They came forward with trying to make the adjustment from where it was at. I think it was 300 to the 500. They initially wanted to go from 300 to 750. And I think there was some discussion between the Board of Selectmen and them saying, could you go to 500 and give it a few years to sort of, allow it to settle into the budget and then come back if you want and you have the right, to petition. But that would help the town in a budget, purpose. It would be helpful. And they did that.
Yeah, I remember that it was brought down, so it was just interesting to see it, come
Yeah,
back up.
because I think the
Okay.
petition came in at 750 and at deliberative session, it was reduced to the 500.
Okay, yeah, by the same group that had
By the same-
petitioned it,
by the
right.
same-
Yeah,
So
they
that's where I
changed
was
it.
just surprised to see it again.
Because it was too big a jump at one time.
Okay.
At one time, I'm sorry.
It'd be interesting to see what the neighboring towns have too. So
It's all over the place.
yeah,
I think we looked at that before.
yes, we did. All right, so are there any other items on the town side that we need to discuss? I think that we're good on that one. I'm gonna check them all off. All right, well, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate it. That brings us to the school. All right. So, School budget. So Article A is the election of Article 1 would be the operating budget. Mr. Cutter, I'm pretty sure you probably have the most up-to-date information on this, right? The current, because you reconciled our numbers.
I did, yes. And so, Corey and I, Mr. Zibicki and I had some email exchange right around the Christmas time period after our last meeting. And the 23,916,634 is reconciled to our voting.
All right, were there any changes that we need to be made aware of since the time of this vote? Because there was some discussion, were there not?
No.
No?
Not to my knowledge, unless
Okay.
there's an update from school.
Nope. All right, so before we make any recommendations, are there any further discussion?
Yes, please, Madam Chairman. One of the items that we had chatted about back on our December 9th meeting, and I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see. share screen, was the conversation about special education. And at the time, there was a motion to reduce special education. This is a slide that I presented looking at 2015 through forward. At the time, there was a motion to reduce by 200,000. That failed the committee. In addition to that, there was another motion by Mr. Barca to motion for 100,000 reduction in special education, which also failed. At the time, we had talked about having full committee representation for this particular review and vote. Given that we have full committee representation this evening, I'd like to bring it back up.
Okay. So is there a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to reduce special education by 150,000, which is the difference between the 100,000 that failed and the 200,000 that failed on December 9th.
Is there a second? All right, Mr. Taylor seconds. All right, any further discussion?
I would like to discuss this. Our overall budget and our gross appropriations is up 0.48%. We came in with a very lean budget. We were praised by Chairman Cutter and the committee, well, some members of the committee, for coming in with a very clean budget, with every effort made to come in with a minimal increase. In fact, when we first presented, we did have a decrease. And there's an overall reduction in the tax rate impact for this article. I feel that our budget is as it should be. Yes, we have traditionally had underspend in the special education department, and we have also traditionally returned to the taxpayer more than that underspend. When we have had to use that underspend, it has been to get after maintenance or unanticipated costs. I feel that having this discussion to reduce it based on solely on the lack of a handshake agreement between the budget committee and the school board speaks to the distrust of the budget committee towards the school board, in that our commitment is not necessarily to the budget committee to have an agreement, but it is with the taxpayers. And we've demonstrated year after year that we will return underspend funds as we are required by law. We are required, it's recommended that we maintain a 2% buffer in our budget, and we do so. We budget accordingly, and I think we've proven, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, that we're responsible with our budget. We're seeking alternative funding and revenue actively, and putting that to good use for the taxpayers' benefit. So I don't think a reduction is necessary at this time.
I appreciate your position. I'm still comfortable with the $200,000 reduction. So with 150 as a compromise, I would support that. I do feel that this line is traditionally overfunded. I think there are other areas in the budget that could have been reduced and weren't. And since this is going to be treated as part of a bottom line budget, I think that the bottom line can absorb a reduction of $150,000. Any other comments?
I would like to, I'd like to say that I agree with Ms. Harrison's comments. I do feel like the school board brought forth a fairly lean budget. I was one of the ones that did support the $100,000 reduction the last time we discussed this. I felt that was a compromise from where we started with 200, and hopefully something that would have been managed. But I also believe that the school board, if and when they don't fully spend the dollars that are allocated in this particular account, will return those to the taxpayers. And I'm going to vote based on that belief.
The only issue I have with it is, and it was stated by Corey a few weeks ago, that if he needs to take money from this to spend somewhere else, he does that. If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't support this, but I feel that it can be supported because money's being taken from the holy grail of an account and spent elsewhere. There's also a pot of money in which administration and the SAU are giving themselves raises, which we've discussed over the last few years. So some of them are pretty healthy raises. Maybe some of the money can come out of that fund. At the town level, all our department heads, anybody's salary gets 2%, period.
Fire chief?
Everybody else, huh?
Fire chief?
The fire chief got a new contract. He will get, because this year was a 3%, next year will be a 2%. Okay. Anyone whose salary is subject to that period. Okay. And I've been saying for 3 years that we're overspending in some other areas, mainly the salary of those at the top. If it wasn't for pulling that money elsewhere, I wouldn't support this, but I think that it is warranted because the money can be used for whatever. That's
I feel as though I'm being misquoted here, Mr.
no,
Leary.
that's what you said, Corey. You said if
No,
you need money,
It's not.
Yeah.
I have said that I work to not
Mhm.
take money from special ed.
Yep, but
I
you
did
also said,
last year. I did a couple years ago in order to help fund some much needed capital project work. Now, I do work to not touch special ed, and that is my philosophy. It has been my entire 5 years here. So I believe I'm being misquoted. So we can agree to disagree on that, but I don't pull from that department unless it is absolutely emergent.
well, what you said was that if there was a need somewhere, yes, you will take money from that fund. And that
No,
you did do, and that
no,
you did do that.
no.
It's
If any other departments are running in deficit, it is a bottom line balance, and the funds come from the available appropriated budget approved by the voters, regardless of department.
correct.
That's my point.
So,
I can't control that.
right. My main concern is it's always been returned. It has recently not been returned. So to me, the parameters have changed, and therefore the view on how I would budget this line has changed. In the past, this budget would not have been touched for capital improvements. There would have been other reductions elsewhere to fund those capital improvements, and this would have been left untouched and returned. But by doing this, by tapping into those funds, that agreement ceased to exist, and now it needs to be treated like everything else. And in my opinion, anyway, everybody else is entitled to their own opinion. But in my opinion, if this money is now available for other purposes outside of special education, it is no longer going to be returned to unused funds, cannot be guaranteed to be returned to the taxpayer. So I will not base my decision based on that assumption because I don't believe that to be an accurate assumption.
I think it goes back to the distrust of the established patterns of the school district. We are committed to preparing as lean a budget as possible. We are responsible stewards of the taxpayers' money. And
if I may, and Ms. Harrison, absolutely right. This is a very lean budget. I mean, the fact of the matter is the budget committee has formally made recommendations to reduce the budget by a whopping total of $14,257, which is, in my tenure on this committee for 9 years, is a first, right? And that really does speak to the leanness and the nice job done by both the SAU and the school board to put together this budget. My view, and very similar to Mrs. Douglas here, is that I've not touched special education in the past. We have touched attrition and other areas of the budget, as we all know. Given that this is a bottom line, and given that there is excess in this particular account, according to my opinion, that's why I'm making this recommendation. I am comfortable with the 200. I'm trying to figure out, if the committee will accept the compromise.
I'd like to make a comment on this as well. Mr. Carter's point, there's certainly attrition that could offset this particular reduction. I think, looking at these particular numbers, but ultimately we're taking it off the bottom line budget, so you can backfill it with attrition. Plus, there's also a reserve fund in case we're wrong. However, in 2019, 2020, and 2021, we wouldn't have been wrong with this particular reduction.
Just to follow up to Mr. Taylor, I would say historically, in years past, not in a pandemic, that attrition potentially could have offset this. I think what we have heard the school district say, and many of us have seen this, is that that initial cost to hire is not what it was 3 or 4 years ago. The school district could go out and find people to replace retirees. They're not paying the same thing that they were 2 or 3 years ago, whether that's either due to contract increases or the inability to find qualified people to come in and work with our students. And so I think that is a little bit different lens to look through from that attrition angle.
One thing to consider, though, is my understanding is there's federal funds available through the Recovery Act to help student recovery. That could also, if we find that students need additional help, there will be other additional resources available for that, for the recovery, because eventually, hopefully, God willing, we're out of this and kids start going back. We should be able to be back to our normal budgeting cycles.
And we have earmarked our federal.
Carrie,
I wanna
just
speak.
to clarify that point, so 20% of the ESSER 3 funds need to be set aside for closing gaps. We've used those funds to hire an additional counselor to work with students who are having a difficult time with school, mainly school anxiety-based sort of work. So those funds have already been allocated and utilized because it's really about getting kids back into school and closing those gaps.
I think what's missing from this slide is the amount that the school board has returned to the taxpayers each of these years. And maybe that means, yeah, as a bottom line budget, maybe we just take that off the bottom,
Well,
or you see it as
that
they
it's a
have
big
been
number.
returning it. They have been returning it every year.
Up until recently, I think if you look
It
at
was
the
that
numbers,
1 year.
no, it's within. There has been a change in philosophy, perhaps, in how we return our money. In the past, because I looked, the
I
lion's
think you
share of
put
the
together
money
that
used to
analysis
get
where you showed the
returned.
returns in a spreadsheet, right?
Right, I'm trying to find that.
Yeah.
And
You have, and I'll
always
try to pull
more
it
than
up.
that 200,000 from the special services.
But in years
I
past,
need
the
to really
lion's
just
share.
correct the group. There's not a change in philosophy. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that when, we come in with a lean budget, again, special ed is one of those areas. I mean, it's probably among the greater unknowns. It can take the matter of a couple of students who can really throw this askew pretty quickly, with the cost of placements being what they are. I think it's one area that we want to continue to just be cautious of and make sure that we're budgeting appropriately. We don't have that line. We budget that based on actual students we have. And then if there are students who move in, it results in changes that have to take place. So Corey, I'm sure, is going to clarify exactly the one time. There was one time where I think we had to take some action relative to those funds. But the other thing too is to correct Mr. Leary, this is not a fund. This is a line within a budget, right? So there is a fund, right? There is a special ed expendable trust fund, but this is not a fund. This is a operating budget within our operating budget. Corey, do you have those numbers?
Yeah, so since 2014, which was before my time, we have returned in excess of the special services underspend, except in 1 year, which was 2019, when $75,000 was reallocated to work towards some capital project work that needed to be done. Even if that $75,000 had not been moved, we would not have been able to, based on the entire bottom line underspend, we would not have been able to return the entire special services underspend. So that's just the reality. As Dr. Jenny noted, it is a department within a total operating budget. It is not a separate fund, and it is not treated as such. It is a bottom line budget. And we do work to not pull from those funds, but in some situations it does happen. You just don't know. And if we talk about 19, 20, and even into 21, you're talking about years that are anomalies. It hasn't been a regular business as usual since March 16 of 2020. You have a lot of underspend, you return a lot of fund balance, but that's because in 1 year your schools were closed for 3 months, And then last year was abnormal as well. So I think we've been very conscious of our budgets, and I think reducing that line is personally, I think it's a mistake, and I'd hate to have to pay for it out of somewhere else.
I think maybe Mrs.
So
Douglas.
instead of
sorry.
appropriating it and then waiting to give it back, yet there's a reserve fund in case a new student comes in to offset any of those types of emergencies. What's wrong with them at that point? Again, going back to, you know what? We're voting on a bottom line budget. This way we don't have to worry about how much gets given back. Just budget what you actually need, and you already have a reserve fund to protect you from future issues. And then I would recommend that for next year's warrant article, there's a replenishment listed in there to go ahead and build it up to the 250 in case you had multiple students come in.
Again, I go back to our budget. Our gross appropriation is up less than 0.5% over last year's budget. It's already a very lean budget. Originally, we were well supported by the chair and other members of this committee in saying that, you know, we came in lean and we continue to. In a time of record inflation, yes, we have trouble hiring. So a lot of the underspend is due to that. We haven't been able to fill positions. But I keep going back to, I believe we have established that we are responsible stewards of taxpayer money. And I think allowing the taxpayers to approve the budget put forward by the school district and recommended by the school district is fair. If they decide not to pass it, that's fair as well. But I think making cuts in the name of, well, we can't trust you, or you said you wouldn't touch this, but now you might. I think it's petty, frankly.
Well, I'm sorry. Again, we're treating this as a bottom line budget. Bottom line budgets do the historical data. The historical data supports this reduction. So if we're treating it like a bottom line budget, it gets treated like every other account.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to hold it separate because the what ifs, then it's different than.
We're not holding it separate. We came in budgeting for.
Madam Chairman, may I call the vote, please?
Sure, let's call the vote. So there is there's a motion and a second to reduce it by $150,000. Mrs. Harrison?
No.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Stevens?
No.
Mr. Barca?
No.
Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Sun?
No.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Did I get everybody?
You did?
All right. So then it passes by 5-4. So the reduction of $150,000 to the bottom line budget passes by recommendation. So the updated number.
23,766,634.
23,766,000. I'm sorry.
634.
634 is the new bottom line budget. So then that brings us back to Article 1. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I actually had one more.
Sure.
One more reduction I wanted to propose.
Go ahead.
Is that possible?
The floor is yours.
All right, excellent. So just following up to the questions document, I had asked questions about which AP sciences we're going to be running during this particular budget. So in taking a look at that, there's actually two that are being put in there. So it's page 10 of CHS, AP Chem and Environmental. So that line item totals 3,000. I'd be looking to reduce that line item 610 on page 10 of the CHS budget by $3,000.
Did we vote on that last time? No, Rob.
Mr.
No.
Taylor wasn't here.
No, I believe we had
No.
to wait until we received confirmation as to which AP courses we're
Okay.
going to run during this particular budget.
So there's a motion to reduce by $3,000 to reflect the AP classes. Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Mr. Leary seconds.
I think Mr. Jetty did answer the question though and said that the line item says both, but they just flip flop the value back and forth each year.
Well, Mr. Jetty,
Dr. Jetty.
Dr.
Dr.
Jetty.
Jetty. Dr. Jettie?
Yes.
Uh,
Are you asking me a question? I thought Mr. Barker just answered it.
I wanted confirmation that his recollection was correct.
Yeah, so basically the line, I believe, I didn't bring the budget into the room with me because I didn't know we were going to be voting on the budget tonight, so I apologize. I can go get it though. But at any rate, my recollection of that line is that it's worded with both because the $3,000 goes toward whichever one is running. But let me go grab the actual budget so that I can have that in front of me.
I am looking at it right now. So there is a line for AP Bio
Yep.
for $400, AP Physics for $2,000, but then there's also AP Environmental and AP Chem. That's a separate line item, $3,000.
Yes.
So if
I think the
3,000 flips back and forth, then why do we need the 400 and the 200?
Because
So I believe that they have the chem and the environmental on that cycle. They run every other year against each other. I think it's just a matter of the way the budget got crafted because AP Physics is a late add, so it probably should have
but they're
been
both listed, the line says.
counter listed against the other AP course because they're running through a year. I think it's just a matter of how the department put that together.
But the dollar amount is the same.
I remember it
Yeah.
now. Okay.
So does that answer your question, Mr. Taylor, or are we continuing with the vote?
I'm ready to move to a vote.
All right. It's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on this item?
Well, question, what was the original motion, Mr. Taylor?
To reduce page 10, line 610 for supplies by $3,000 for the line HL, A&P, and AP Chem, because those would not be running.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments by anybody? All right. Hearing none. Mrs. Harrison,
No.
Mr. Leary,
No,
I'm a no. Ms. Stevens,
No.
No.
Mr. Barca, Mr. Cutter,
No.
Mr. Hayes,
No.
Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor? All right, we'll come, all right, yes. All right, Mr. San?
No.
All right, so that motion fails by a vote of 180, yes, fails. Like, I'm thinking positive, yeah, all right. So that means we still have a bottom line of $23,766,634. Is there any further discussion on this article? Hearing none, is there a motion to recommend?
so moved.
So moved.
All right, well, Mr. Leary with a second by Mr. Sun. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. All right, so, okay, Mr. Leary,
I'm a yes, and I'm going to say that this is the first time I ever voted for a budget that had new positions in it that did not go to warrant because the budget is so tight.
ditto. Yes, I don't usually vote in favor, so yes, yes, I'm comfortable with this budget. Ms. Stevens,
For the town.
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right, so that will be recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 9-0-0.
I think my jaw just hit the floor.
I don't think it's ever happened.
Not in my tenure.
Another
Thank you. I
milestone.
appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Article 2. Shall the Litchfield School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Litchfield School District and the Litchfield Education Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level? The years and increases, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $351,187 for fiscal year 2023, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. Estimated tax impact is 29 cents, recommended by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0. We should discuss because we haven't seen anything about this, but I would not recommend a vote tonight.
And Dr. Jetty, we can see your screen now.
Excellent, thank you. So first of all, I misspoke earlier. I thought we had shared this. I thought that was something that occurred, or I said that anyway. And then I forgot that we actually held off.
Can you zoom in,
Sorry?
please? Could you please zoom in?
We held off on doing that pending having the school board lay eyes on it, right? So the school board voted on the actual TA language, but we had to get the summary pulled together. They did not see this until last night. So I should have sent this earlier today and I forgot to do that. So I apologize.
Mike, can you make it bigger?
Those of us in the nosebleeds can't see it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Any better? Okay. So the year one costs are listed here for you, so you can see them. They are the numbers that are listed in the warrant article. The cost breakdown for year one, you can see that it is largely a salary increase. There is a slight increase to the co-curricular stipends, and there's also increased costs relative to the dental plan that we'll be offering to our employees. And that's how we arrive at the $351,187. In year two, it's salary with another slight increase to the co-curricular, bringing us to the $364,665. So that'll tie back to the two amounts that you're looking at. Let me talk about salary, since that is the large bulk of the cost items. So in year one, what the parties have agreed to is a 1.5% cost of living adjustment that is added into steps 1 through 7. There's a slightly higher COLA at 1.75 added into steps 8 through 11, and then 2.25 has been added to steps 12 through 15. And then everybody earns one step. So everybody will advance on the salary schedule, and those adjustments are being made to the salaries. So overall, it's a 3.7% increase in salaries for our teachers and professional
Is
staff.
that in addition to COLA?
In year two, it's a 1.5% COLA, a 1.75% COLA, and a 2.5% COLA added into those steps with one step earned. That results in a 3.76% overall increase in the salary lines. Let me just pause on that because the bulk of the money is represented by that salary. I just want to see if there are questions on it.
I have a question out of curiosity. Is there a reason why you gave such bigger increases to the top steps versus the lower steps?
The parties had a lot of back and forth relative to the way to do this. And ultimately, everybody just felt that that's where in order to retain the staff that we have and make sure that we stay competitive against other districts, those were the steps where we were losing people to other districts. And we were having a loss of kind of institutional memory, institutional staying power as people were going to neighboring districts for more money. So we felt we needed to do that in order to stop that from continuing. So
I recall a discussion that the board had about if you kind of look at the salary chart, the starting salaries are comparable with surrounding districts and, for that amount of experience, but we found that bottom of the chart was kind of below surrounding districts. So it was basically comps and the fact that we were losing people that were in that 12 to 15 range. I can't.
Yeah, exactly. In the 12 to 15 range, that's where people were going to other districts. And with the teacher shortage that we're currently experiencing, other districts are happy to pick up that thing because that's better than not having anybody, right? So they're willing to hire at higher steps right now. So we're seeing more of a migration out in those steps than historically.
So is this their yearly increase? Is a salary increase or is it a cost of living adjustment?
It's both. So the salary grid that we have, we've made a cost of living adjustment to the numbers that are on the grid. That's the 1.5, 1.75, and 2.25 or 2.5. And then they make a step on it. So that's how they're able to see a 3.7% overall increase because we've adjusted the scale upward and we've also advanced people on the scale.
Because it might be easier for the taxpayers if you just say everybody's getting a 3% or a 3.7 versus.
Well, I can't say everybody because teachers on the beginning steps are getting less than teachers on the higher steps. So I really, you have to give an overall impact of it and know that the impact varies depending on where a teacher is on the grid.
So people at the upper end of the spectrum, how much, if a 3.7 is the average, that would indicate to me that the people at the low, was it, they considered the higher part of the ladder or the lower part of the ladder because it's at the bottom?
Well,
the ones with the most
When you look at it, it's
experience.
the bottom, but it's
Yeah.
the high.
so the ladder goes down.
So I don't want to see the bottom of the ladder because I don't want them to think that the ones with more years, like what kind of raises of overall salary increases are we looking at for like the maximum experience?
Well, so it's going to vary. If somebody's on step 15 and they've maxed out, the only increase they're going to see is the 2.25.
Okay.
Because they're at the top. So there is no step to be earned. They're there. They've arrived, right? Or the 2.5.
Okay.
If someone, Dr. Jetty, if someone were at step 14 going to 15 and this were to pass, what would their potential increase be?
So there's no definite formula on the steps, but let's just use each step represents roughly 3%. So you could look at it that they're making the 3% salary step plus earning the cost of living adjustment to that new step.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So they could make 3% plus 2.5%.
Correct.
So they could make over 5%.
Correct.
I can only go by what
Would
would be
find
with the
themselves on
town.
a step where it's at the 2.5, so it's sort of, it's got to do with advancing on a salary progression up to that top tier where it maxes out.
I mean, again, I can only go by what the town does, and the town maxes out at 3%.
Right. But we have
except for salary people.
I know. I totally understand that. And, if we could get away with a lower, a lower increase, but we're having a hard enough time finding teachers as it is because of the hiring shortage. So it's really important that we remain competitive and remain attractive to prospective teachers and keep the ones that we already have.
So what additional changes have been incorporated into the contract that might make those raises a little more palatable?
Yep. So let's look at the other changes. So there's basically language that's been added in relative to the current practice on professional development days. So teachers are able to take professional development time, but that was never put into the collective bargaining agreement. So we've now captured it within the agreement.
So how
It's
is
not a
it?
change in practice. It's just putting the language into the agreement.
So what is the practice?
The practice is that they're able to put in for 2 professional development days in order to maintain their certification.
Okay.
We added language regarding the current practice on track changes. So in other words, if a teacher were to, and actually track, but by that I want to be clear, I'm talking about lanes. So if there's somebody who has a bachelor's degree and they earn a master's degree midway through the year, they're able to make a lane change. We have practice that we have followed on that, but again, it was not in the collective bargaining agreement. So we put language in there so it's clear to all teachers exactly what steps need to be followed in order to make a lane change mid-year.
Okay.
We merged so we had an MOA on a stipend committee. So this is the committee that oversees the co-curricular stipends. It's a joint committee of administrators and members of the bargaining unit, and we put that language into the contract so that it's there, so it's clear, how we go about setting what those stipends will be. And then if a new club or activity comes along, there's a procedure that the committee follows in order to determine whether to fund it, and if so, how much. We've added language in at the end of the school year that will allow a teacher with unused personal days to convert those into sick days. So this way, our hope is that this will allow people to, be careful with the number of personal days that they end up taking in a year, because they know that if they don't utilize those, they are able to benefit from having those convert into sick days, which then carry over from year to year.
So did personal days in the past not accrue? It was use it or lose it?
Correct.
Is there a cap as to how many can be converted?
They get 2.
They have 3 personal days a year.
All right, so this increases the exposure at retirement, right, when they cash in unused funds?
Many of the teachers at retirement have maxed out the sick days. So it actually, I think what it can do is help making sure that we are fully staffed throughout the year by having the personal days convert into the sick days.
I understand the practical point of view. I'm asking about the budget point of view of, there's currently a maximum as the number of sick days a person can retire and take the number of?
Correct.
All right, so this does not increase it. It just allows them to hit that number earlier, potentially.
In theory, if they don't use the day, if they earn 10 sick days a year now, they could earn 13 a year if they didn't use their personal days.
Okay.
We benefit obviously by having the person in the classroom 3 more days. So it's,
Again, I'm not arguing program. I'm thinking budget impact. So please continue.
next, there was an agreement to increase the health buyout from $1,000 to $1,500. However, in order to do that, we put language in that 27 employees need to not take the district insurance, which is 2 more than current, which makes that a budget neutral increase, right? So if 2 people do not take an insurance plan, it will fund the 1,500. So there's not really an overall impact on that line.
Have you ever thought about giving them the option, either you take the insurance or not? And if you don't take it, you're not getting a buyout? Because I know at the town we're doing that. We've discussed that a few times.
You getting a buyout?
All new people, not ones that are already in the system, but new people that come in, either you take the insurance or you don't. You're not going to get a pocket full of money if your spouse works at BAE or something, has a better insurance program than the school has. They shouldn't be making money off of that.
Concern is, and everybody will be on our insurance.
Have you ever thought of that? And then the second question I had was, at the steps, when somebody gets to the top step, that's it. They can't get any more. But if you're looking to retain people that have been here for longer, why not treat them better than that? Because you're telling people that just come in the system, well, you can move. But if you're at the top, if you've been at 15, you can't go anywhere.
That's why we are increasing the COLA by a larger percentage at that level.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it would do them better to give them something a little more substantial.
I mean, I know you understand the nature of contracts, but this isn't this is what the school board want and we did everything. You know, this is a lot of back and forth and negotiating with the union.
And
so.
it's tough to do it right here because we're all just seeing this for the first time.
Yeah.
These are the questions that could have been asked a while ago.
Yep.
And I understand this contract is just ratified a little while ago. But
I just want to understand your point about the top step. Are you suggesting that we add maybe 5 more steps to the top?
I'm not suggesting that you add steps, but when you get to a certain step, which is 15, I believe, that's it.
Right.
You're at the edge of the cliff.
I think it's longevity too. Is longevity once you hit 20?
There's a longevity stipend
Okay.
every year.
But looking at the
You
time,
give that to the people that are getting the steps as well, right?
No,
So 5, 10, 15
no.
years, people
Once
don't
they
get
hit, no, there's no. Is there a longevity stipend for 10? I don't think so. I think it's at 15 years you get, instead of going up a step, you get a longevity stipend. So I think it's from I can't remember the total amounts for what years.
Because if you're trying to retain people for long term, I mean, you treat them like you want them long term.
all right, I appreciate it, but unfortunately we've got like 40 minutes left. So
We gotta move.
I can
The
tell you
next
that.
language is that there is a prescription reimbursement pool that's been in the contract for some time. And we just wanted to clarify that language, that we need to have medical receipts given to the HR director. And the reason for that is that the auditors zeroed in on this practice and they were not happy with the way it was, what the practice that had been adopted many, many, many years ago. So we had to clarify that, look, we're not really, nobody wants to know why there's a reimbursement. That can be redacted. HR director is already sworn to all the HIPAA regulations. But we just need to make sure that there is a paper trail to support that. So this was actually a big benefit for the district to be able to secure that language.
Well, it's also a benefit to the employee to not get audited by the IRS. So go ahead, continue.
The dental benefit has been increased from $1,000 to $1,500, and you can see that the overall cost of that was summarized up above. You scroll right up to it to make sure it was $6,258 in additional benefit in order to increase that dental benefit for all the employees. The organization, or all of our faculty will have a vision plan now that is offered to them, but it will be 100% funded by the employees. So there's no budget impact for that. Elementary teachers have a duty-free lunch and recess time. The way the contract is written now, they have to be consecutive. They have to be, it ends up being an hour in the middle of the day. This has said that it does not need to be consecutive. You can have a duty-free lunch period that is separate from duty-free recess time. That will give the principals greater ability to schedule at GMS.
Okay.
Planning time language has been updated so that everybody is very clear about what the contract says is guaranteed planning time language. And this way we can, make sure that everybody is on the same page. So this brings all the practice back up to speed by having updated and clarified language.
Okay.
We added language that we can begin 7 calendar days before Labor Day instead of 5. Basically what that does is it allows the district every year to begin before Labor Day. The way the language was written, most of the time you could begin before Labor Day, but every now and then you couldn't.
Right.
The every now and then, by the way, was this year and last year. And in both cases, we signed a memo of understanding saying we want to start before Labor Day. So we've just put into the language and practice that has evolved.
I personally hate that.
We added language in about 5 emergency remote days that we can have those be remote. That's been the practice. And so now we have weather-related days when we can have remote learning. And I think that, in the past, when we didn't have experience with remote learning, that was a bit of a challenge. But now that everybody is comfortable with remote learning and families understand what remote learning looks like, we have added that language in. My phone, by the way, is blowing up with superintendents chatting about tomorrow. So I'm not going to say a word about where we're headed with this. I'll tell you, I'll be up at 4 to chat further about that. So anyway.
Snow dance, right?
We increased the amount of money available for the stipends, so the committee has a little bit more to work with in that pool. And then finally, there's language now that the LEA can provide input to the district administrators on district training coming up. So we've always collaborated around that, but now it's in the collective bargaining agreement that there needs to be that opportunity for input going forward.
Okay.
And that's the summary of what we have for the LEA agreement.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none. I'm hoping that that's in our email so we can think about, talk, and vote on it next week.
Are we going to get the full contract too?
That would be lovely. Could we request
Yeah,
a
Dr.
copy?
Jenny, if you're able to share the full contract as well as the summary tomorrow, that'd be fantastic. Looking forward to the committee.
So we don't have a full contract. We have the current contract, which we'd be happy to give to you. But the new contract is not prepared until it's approved. We edit it until the voters support it, in which case we prepare the new contract.
All right, we'll take the current one because we used to get the proposed, we can mix match.
Do you have the new salary schedules? You must have those.
Yeah, I think we do. Can we get the new salary schedules, Mike?
I can see if those are ready. I'm not sure if they've been prepared yet, but.
Whatever you have, send it over. Any other questions?
If we can't get the contract as written, can we get a copy of the current contract
That's
with a copy of the changes
I think it's
so that we can compare?
I can get, I mean, remember, the current contract's online, so we have that available to you. We'll get you the link. It's right on our website. And then,
Personally, I like hard copies. I know Troy doesn't like when I ask for those either, but
Like attached to the document, like no, it's actually a link.
I like to have something to.
But
I
yeah.
don't have it with me. I'd give you a copy right now. I have it at home.
If you do it, yeah, just make me a
So
copy.
the request is for a copy of the current contract, the summary of the changes, salary schedules, anything else? All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. We'll read Article 5. We will not have to vote on this one. Shall the Litchfield School District, if Article 4 is defeated, authorize the Litchfield School Board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 4 cost items only? Recommended by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0.
Ms. Douglas, I think you skipped Article 3 and 4.
Oh, well, Article 3 is Article 5 with the,
School or the
it says
contract.
substitute. Article 3 is, shall the school district, if Article 2 is defeated, yeah, right, Article 1,
You're right.
2, 3.
Keep going.
Article 3 is
Authorize-
a non-budget
Right.
item. The board is recommending to the public that we
Right.
have permission to have one special meeting should they reject Article 2.
And I would like to thank you guys for including that in the budget and the warrant articles. We usually see them on the town side. It's nice to see them on the school side. So thank you for your inclusion.
Have a special meeting?
No, the after the police contract is usually if the police contract fails, are we authorized? So
No. I don't
Hmm,
The
we never
town-
did that.
I'll send you some more warrant articles. I'm pretty sure I voted on that.
Not since I've been here.
All right, and I've been here for quite a while because it used to be asked.
I'm a firm believer that the March vote counts.
So Article 4.
I wouldn't support that. all
Shall the
time.
Litchfield School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Litchfield School District and the Litchfield Support Staff Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level, years 22 through 25, 3 different years, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $99,433 for the fiscal year of 2023. Such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those which would be paid at the current staffing levels. Estimated tax impact, 8 cents. Recommended by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0.
Yep, and so there are the three costs that you just read that are standardized in that article. So I'll give you the salary breakdown in the custodian. So remember that there are currently 4 tracks that exist within that collective bargaining agreement. So for custodians, all years of the agreement, there will be a 0.5% cost of living adjustment made to the grid, and then each employee will advance 1 step equal to 3%. So it's roughly a 3.5% increase for the custodians, and it's the same situation with the food service workers. In the case of our paraprofessionals, we have changed from a fairly complicated grid system. I mean, there are 3 tiers in there, non-certified grid. And so we've simplified that down to really 1 grid, and we're not separating out by educational background. So it just allows us to have a more simplified and unified approach to placing our paraprofessionals on the salary grid. In year 1, they're receiving a 1.5% COLA added to the grid plus a step equal to 3%. So it's a 4.5%. And in years 2 and 3, it's a 1% COLA with a step. So it's 4%. In the case of the monitors, we have created a step schedule based on the number of years of service that they have, and they're grouped by 3 years at a time for 4 total steps. So it's years 1, 2, and 3 are one group, then they would advance to the next, which would be 4, 5, and 6. And then there'd be a 7, 8, 9, and finally a step 10. That's when they max out. And there's a 2% cost of living added to the grid, and then each step in their case is 2%.
Quick question. Can you zoom a little bit further for those of us with aging eyes?
I got this pretty well maxed out. I'll try one more. How's that?
There we go.
I can see it better, so thank you.
And finally, administrative assistants. We've removed the distinction between an ADM 1 and an ADM 2 track, so that now it is simply an administrative assistant track, and we've changed to a 2-tier grid, so that the receptionist and athletic administrative track is 1 tier, and then administrative assistant is the other tier. So we no longer will have that distinction. Other changes, we've added longevity for the monitors. We've got several cafeteria monitors who have been with us for a number of years. And they were the only employees in the CBA that did not have a longevity piece. So we felt adding that in was fair and equitable. We added 2 additional sick days for school year staff. So they're going from 5 to 7 days. And that just became very apparent as important during this pandemic. Having only the 5 days, and when one is donated to the sick bank, it really is not a lot of sick time for our employees who are, in many cases, working with students who are quite ill and more likely to come down with something. So we also increased their carryover language from 15 days to 20 days so they can build up that bank. The sick bank was changed from being mandatory to being voluntary. And the district is matching donated days into that sick bank. So we want to make sure that the people who choose to participate in the sick bank have a bank that's available to help them if they were to hit a situation, a medical condition where they needed to be supported by the bank. There's a dollar cap on the end of year funds that are used for course reimbursement. Essentially, the association wanted to make sure that that if there was money left over in that bank, it would not all end up going to just a couple of people. They wanted to spread it out a little bit more. There's language that's been added to allow other staff to help custodians when short-staffed. We had negotiated that last year as part of our MOA with the associations, and it worked out quite well. We had several paraprofessionals and other employees who would stay after their shift in order to help the custodians out. So, we're currently short-staffed in custodians still. So this is language that's helpful because other folks can pitch in and help. There's language that allows staff to help food service when short-staffed. And I can tell you that happened today. We have a significant number of food service staff that were out. And thankfully, there were people who were willing to step in and to help out. So that was much needed, and we're glad to have that in the CBA now. We've added language allowing PD for our food service and monitors when we have a remote instructional day. So the remote instructional days is pretty clear what a paraprofessional would do, but we wanted to make sure that our food service and monitors were able to continue their professional development during those days. And finally, there is language that staff are paid at their regular rate if they're asked to be a bus monitor. The bus monitor rate of pay differed, and it was difficult to get somebody to take on that task, and those are required tasks. So making sure that they get their regular rate was important. So that's the overall summary to the LSSA agreement.
So I see increases rates for most of the positions except for the admins. Do we know what the increase that those employees will be seeing?
The administrative assistants?
Yes.
I'm going to have to get back to you on that because I don't have that number in front of me, so I apologize. You're right; it's not listed here, and we should add that line in.
So my question would be the same: copies of the contracts, any salary grids that are affected, the whole, whatever we can look at to see would be much appreciated. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I think Tina answered mine about the staff helping other staffs on the bottom there, Mr. Jetty. Where you said, staff to be paid if they're asked to be a monitor or whatever. No, that's all voluntary, correct?
Oh, it is voluntary. Yep.
Okay. So, but if they're asked and they say no, that they don't want to do it, what's the?
Nothing.
Nothing?
And in fact, what
Okay.
we've done, I believe, without having Holly here, our HR person, but I think we've just offered it up as an option
As
for
an
people.
option? Okay.
So anyone who steps forward and says, yeah, I'd like to help out after school gets out, we've allowed them to do that, which has been beneficial for everybody, really.
I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we will vote on this after next week's budget hearing. So any questions that come up throughout the week on these two contracts should be directed through the chair, Mr. Cutter, so that they can be addressed by the school. That moves us on to Article 5, this time, legit Article 5. Shall the Litchfield School District, if Article 4 is defeated, authorize the school board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 4 cost items only. Recommended by the school board, vote of 5-0-0. So that is a non-budget committee item, but we are just reading through them. That brings us to Article 6. Shall the Litchfield School District authorize the school board to enter into a 20-year municipal lease agreement in the amount of $5,066,140 for the purpose of funding the Litchfield Middle School project, including but not limited to building renovation, heating and ventilation, lighting and controls, and renewable energy, and to further raise and appropriate a sum of $195,000 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause, majority vote required. Estimated tax impact 16 cents, recommended by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0. So I turn that over to you guys.
Yeah, I think Mike's got the rundown.
So I put up here the spreadsheet. So a couple of things I hope the budget committee notes. This, we continue to fine tune these numbers and work closely with our team that is putting this together. And so I know the reaction to it was the number was higher than anybody wanted to see last time. We've continued to work on exactly what we can do and how we can bring this forward, because this is critical. Getting the middle school buttoned up and getting these renovations completed at the middle school will position us very well for the future, for the next 40 years, we hope. And, you know, the situation is relatively dire. I can tell you that, you know, we're looking at 2 boilers that are original to the building, and we have an oil tank that has failed or is close to failing inspection. I think it was put on a watch list. And so when you add up replacing the oil tank and boilers, you're looking at $1 million, and then you're still buying oil for the next 40 years. So we just think it's important that we take a responsible approach to do this in a way that will be result in long-term savings for the taxpayers, and that's what this project proposes to do. So the 2 numbers at the top of this, which are the North Branch project scope number
Can you please
and
zoom?
solar array.
Can you blow it up, please?
Storage number. Yep, hang on.
Sorry, we're blind.
Derek can probably see it really good.
Finally, that suit paid
Is that
off.
any better for you?
A little bit more.
His neck's gonna hurt tomorrow from green.
If I go, I guess, you know what, I don't see what you're seeing because
Yeah,
you're blowing up my screen here, but there you go.
how's that?
That looks much better.
Better, yeah. Imagine looking at your cell phone from 10 feet away.
All right, so, you know, keep in mind that those are the 2 numbers that you saw the last time. They total up to the 7.499,140 amount. But a couple of things that are really critical. We're talking about renovating the building completely, heating and ventilation completely, lighting and controls completely, and finally having renewable energy as our energy source going forward. I want to point out that the bids are actually due on January 20th. So everything that we're talking about, these are preliminary estimates. We believe that when we get full engagement from the construction community around us, that those bids are going to come in tighter, and that we'll be able to further take some money away from this. But notice that that's January 20th, which means we may have an amendment to it at some point down the road. But right now, we have to work with the numbers that we have going forward. What I have here in grayscale are the same three parts of the project. It's insulating the foundation, it's updating the kitchen, the cooler, and the dumpster area consistent with the long-range plan, the capital plan that the town has approved, and a locker room renovation. Basically, the locker room renovation will allow us to capture 2 classrooms out of unused space in the building. Nobody's utilizing the locker rooms any longer. So we feel that converting that into usable space and gaining 2 classrooms will position us very well going forward. So our recommendation from the committee to the school board was not to take these cuts. We presented them as, okay, these are the kinds of things that are built into that. This represents about $1 million of the project. But the sense was not to take those cuts, and the board agreed when they voted on this last evening. So if you take the number that we have up above, we'll call it 7.5 million, and you do your value engineering on mechanical, at this time, we're not poised to take any further reduction on that because we need to wait and see where the bids come in. We believe that when the bids come in, there will be value engineering about $50,000 in electrical. And so we are proposing, or have proposed to take that in our analysis. We also believe that the bidding is going to produce another $250,000 in savings and are comfortable taking that at this time. The microgrid, which is the solar field on the roof of the building, and the battery backup system, we're going to take a reduction of $1.4 million and fund that part of the project in a different manner that you're going to learn about in just a minute. And finally, we've identified $733,000 in grants and revenue that we want to apply toward the project and take off what we're asking the taxpayers for. So that's the 80% of the ESSER3 funds, $538,000. Remember, the 20% has gone toward closing the learning gaps, leaving 80% available for the ventilation project. There are impact fees that the town has, last known at just shy of $45,000. We will ask to apply those toward this project. And finally, the capital reserve funds, we're going to propose to transfer $150,000 out of capital reserve and use it toward this project. And I'll explain in a second why we're recommending that and why the board agreed. So that's how we get to the 733 reduction. And that leaves the 7.5 million minus 2.433 million. So we have a total cost of the project that needs to be financed at $5,066,140. Let me talk a little bit deeper about the funding for a second. You can see that in the school building maintenance capital reserve fund, $289,106.08. That was our balance as of last June. We recommended that we use $150,000 of that money. So keep in mind, and this is a really important point for the taxpayers and the budget committee to remember, we've replaced the roof on that money without asking for a tax increase. We've replaced the windows on the building. This is the middle school without asking for a tax increase. So our feeling is that, and by the way, if this project gets funded, we're then not going to have to worry about replacing boilers at the middle school ever, because they'll be gone. And the oil tank will be resolved as part of the project also. So our sense is that by reducing that risk that exists in one of our major buildings and getting this buttoned up, that we can transfer 150, which is a little more than half of the money that's in there, toward the project, still leaving us money available if there were to be a problem at Campbell or a problem at Griffin in the short term, we hope. We also have that ventilation money that's marked in red, and then the impact fee money. I'll also point out that originally when we were pricing this out, we had these two dollar amounts, $180,000 and $69,000 we wanted to apply toward the project, but after the PUC voted to eliminate New Hampshire Saves, we lost the ability to count on those rebates. There currently is a bill in the legislature to bring that back and to restore that funding. And so if anybody wants to contact their legislator and encourage that, because that's real money that if it comes our way, we're going to apply toward the project as opposed to having the taxpayers fund. So it would just further reduce that if that were to become available. Next slide is talking about the solar field, because I deducted and we saw us take away $1.4 million. And so how are we going to pay for the solar field that would be on the roof? Well, it's still a $1.4 million solar field, but instead of the school district purchasing it, we're going to have a group of investors purchase, supply, and own that solar field. They will ask us to make an annual payment to them of $89,031. And that money is coming from energy savings, right? So by not paying Eversource and not paying for oil, we will be able to use the money in our operating budget to pay the investors for the solar field. That will occur for 6 years of time. So think of it as a power purchase agreement, sorry, where they are for 6 years receiving the energy deferral costs. That totals $534,186. But that's money that we already have in our operating budget, earmarked toward Eversource and currently toward Burke Oil. So instead of paying those two vendors, we'll be paying the investors for the investment in the solar field. In year 6, there will be a lump sum buyout of $375,882. And that lump sum buyout will transfer ownership of the solar field from the investors to the Litchfield School District. So at that point, we will own the system outright. And the total cost is $910,068. So we will essentially have purchased a $1.4 million grid, saving about $500,000 through this payment mechanism that we have. And then the question is, why would they do this? Where does the $500,000 in value go? And the answer is that the investors will benefit from federal tax credits on their investment. So they will also earn federal tax credits that will make up the difference and some profit for the investors that are not available to a municipality such as the Litchfield School District. So we can't apply for or earn federal tax dollars. The investors can. And so this way, the investors will make that initial cost investment and sell it back to us over time, where we will then continue to receive the benefits of those in the future. So we come back.
Can I?
Of course.
Can we ask questions, or do you want us to hold those?
I'd be happy to take questions.
The question on this page right here, where on row 6, that lump sum buyout in year 6, where would that money come from, that $375K?
So as we're keeping track, so remember that we're avoiding more than $89,000. So we're going to have to set some aside. It's about $62,000 a year that we'll have to set aside. We may do it gradually. We may do it in a defer initially. We're not exactly sure how we're going to ensure that we have it, but we know we will, and we know we will have to build up toward that. Okay.
Okay.
So what does that mean on the municipal lease purchase? So you can see that we've actually, anybody knows spreadsheets know there's a whole series of hidden calculation tables here because we've been back and forth with so many numbers. We've tested out numerous ways, but now this is the one that matters because the $5,066,140 is the amount that we need to finance. We've recommended to the board, the bank has told us to use a 2% calculation right now. And we feel that spreading this out over 20 years is the most responsible way to proceed, which gives us a annual payment of $307,545. So we're saying use $308,000 just as the annual payment estimate. We were trying to do it in a shorter period of time, 15 years. You can see that increases it to $391,000, which just increases the amount that we have to raise and appropriate. So our sense is that spreading it out over a longer period so that we have the middle school buttoned up and ready for the future is the more responsible way to proceed. I also pointed out to the board last night that with potential increases in the rates on the horizon, one question that has been asked is deferring for a year. What we're being told by the folks in the construction trade is not to expect that there will be sharp decreases in pricing for the equipment. Everybody feels that these are the prices that are going to carry forward, and you also run the risk of having the rate increase to 2.5%. So you can see that just increases the amount of the payment to $322. The last slide to zero in on is, and this sort of gets back to the question that Mr. Sun just asked. Basically, the operating costs that are in the budget now, energy savings at LMS, we're predicting that will be about $64,000 from the ventilation and lighting upgrades that are done over the summer. And oil savings at LMS will total about $49,000. So there's about $113,000 available in the operating budget. So when you take the $308,000 of what the payment is, and you say that we have $113,000 in the operating budget, that means we need to raise and appropriate $195,000. And that's how it ties back to the second part of the warrant article, the overall municipal lease, and then how much we have to raise and appropriate. The tax impact is estimated to be at 16 cents per thousand. And so based on all of these numbers, all of the work that we've done, the school board voted 5-0-0 to recommend this warrant article to get the middle school taken care of and finalized.
So the 195 is for the first year, correct? After that, it shoots up?
It actually declines.
So I thought you used the energy savings to pay the investors. So I'm confused as to how we can also use that money to offset the payment.
That's the payment to the investors.
What? So we have 113,000 available in funds that we are currently spending on energy that we will not need to spend.
Right.
The 308,000 is inclusive of the investors fund payment, or is that the $5 million?
That's the municipal lease payment.
That's the 5 million.
So
Here.
where's the
89,000 a year to investors?
89 to the investors.
right? But we said that we were funding that out of the energy savings, but we're also using that to offset the annual payment for the $5 million. So I'm curious as to how we can apply that funding twice. Unless I'm missing something, but
So the 195 payment every year includes the payment to the investors, the 89,000 to the investors.
But didn't it say it was 350,000 after the first year?
No, 375 is after year 6. We have a one lump sum payment. So the plan is, well, what I would like to do is use
That's
money,
for the
put
solar.
money into to pay off the solar.
But for the whole project, after year one, it jumps to 350 or 375 million, $1,000 after year one. What's the second year payment?
Yeah, so hang on one second. I don't have, all of the numbers that you're looking at are summary numbers from another spreadsheet. And I've got to go find that. So I apologize.
I think Corey told us that number at the last meeting.
but I wasn't sure if that changed.
Corey, are you in the other spreadsheet? Do you have the other one open?
I'll open it now.
No, the number's always 308, but he said it goes. It's
The payment stays at 308. That's consistent, but we're going to realize savings from the oil and electricity based on the improvements, and we're also going to have savings from some initiatives we've been working on at the high school as well, such as the lighting project that's going on.
Okay. So a couple of questions. What is your backup source of power? If you say that the oil and Eversource are gone, what do you do if the grid is not enough to power the school? What is going to be your backup plan? Because you do need a backup source of power, period.
So we'll still be
You're
tied.
still connected to Eversource.
So there still will be an electric bill and there still will be an oil bill.
Yes, it'll be greatly reduced, so Bob. So this represents savings, but it doesn't zero out the line for Eversource because you're right on
And Burke oil.
days and so forth. Well, no, oil will be gone. Won't be an oil tank and there won't be.
How are you going to heat the school if you don't have the power to run the?
So it'll be air source heat pumps that are part of this project.
Off electric?
Off electric, correct.
Okay.
That's why you have a large array generating electric because the air source heat pumps, which are quite efficient, will be the heating source.
And the array
So there
doesn't.
will not be a boiler, there will not be an oil tank in the
You
ground.
won't be using
anymore,
oil.
But you still will be connected to the grid because you'll need that as your backup.
Yeah, you do need a backup source. And then what would be the insurance savings if you went 15 years versus 20? Like with the town, we cut the fire engine down to 5 years from 7, and we realized $34,000 in savings. So this should be quite a bit more if you were to drop that number down from 20 to 15. And then the other one is that I had was are the funds that you're talking about, ESSA funds and all that, are those 100% guaranteed or are those hopefuls? That you hope to get them or you're applying for them but not guaranteed?
They're pending approval of the conceptual design, which we should get from the state because we're compliant.
But those funds, Mr. Leary, those funds are allocated from they've been allocated. The state just has to approve the plan that the school district submits.
Exactly.
So they have to approve it, but if they don't, on the odd chance that they don't, I mean, the voters are going to the polls, they're going to need to know exactly what they're
Well, if
spending.
the plan isn't approved, we don't have a plan anymore, right?
True.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want the voters to approve it, they need to know all the X's and O's.
Right.
There can't be any variables because it's their tax dollars.
No,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. But if the state won't approve the plan, then
Mhm.
we can't do the.
Will that be done
project.
before March?
Will
before the
plan
March
be
vote?
done
Yeah.
before March? Yeah. I
The
believe
state
so.
approval? Okay. And then my last question is, why are we not putting this on a bond because of the dollar amount?
That's my question.
So again, we looked at various ways of funding the project. And the board's sense is that the municipal lease is a way to fund projects such as this. It's been used successfully by the town for many years with various other items. And so our sense is that this allows us to get this project done. There's been concern in town in the past about double bonding. And so with the need to also come forward with a project for the elementary school, we want to make sure that we get this taken care of and are incorporating it into our operating budget. Because obviously a new elementary school will need to be a bond. That's an even bigger project than this. And so it's important that we make sure that we have that bond ready to go, hopefully next year, and not have it hindered by this bond. So we're trying to get after, two schools that have had, some level of projects that have been deferred for such a period of time that has reached a heightened state. So we want to get the middle school taken care of, and then we'll go for a bond for the elementary school. That's the plan.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
We are at our 9:30 stop time for this evening. I'd like to make a motion to continue for 30 minutes so we can wrap up the discussion on Article 6 and then Article 7.
Is there a second? Because I like that motion.
Second. Yep.
All right, roll call vote. Mrs. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Sun.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right, pass, approved, 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just the price tag on this. It warrants a bond. You have to have a bond on this.
Dr. Jenny, a question for you, right? So I was going through and as I shared earlier, I have a draft budget here at deck for next week, kind of in the works here. When I was going through this warrant article just a couple days ago, the amount listed, and I understand you said it was fluid, but the amount listed on the article was $4,617,000 with a payment of $168,000, which was also a significant decrease than December when it was presented. But what changed in the last 2 days to go from 4.6 to 5?
It really came down to the ventilation. So when the final drawings for the ventilation came through, that resulted in a slight increase to there. That's why we're not taking, if I go back to the assumptions that we're making, you'll notice that under the mechanical, we are not taking any assumed savings because that number has been kind of on a roller coaster. So that's what drove it back up. You were at what, 4.6, right? It went up about 400,000.
Correct.
Yep. And so originally we were taking a deduction, an assumed deduction in this line. We no longer are comfortable doing that. We're going to wait until the bids come in and see exactly where it is because it was too much seesawing on it. So we weren't comfortable with it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to reiterate Mr. Leary's comments. I think it's a mistake to do this as a lease, quite frankly. I understand you're legally allowed to, but I don't think that people in town are going to really care about that nuance. I think what's going to happen is cynics like, I'm a cynic, sorry, born and bred. I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say lease agreement. Why would we go for a lease purchase? Oh, you can't get the bond vote. So to me, this tells me that we don't believe that the community as a majority would support a bond vote, which is why we're going for a lease agreement, a lease purchase.
But you do need a majority.
You need a super majority for a bond. You need a larger percentage. So by going for a lease purchase, that's telling me we don't think we can get that number.
What's the difference in the percentage?
It's
66.1 for a bond,
I thought they changed
50.1 for.
It's a super majority.
Yep.
No, I thought it was 3/5 for a bond now.
It's still more than 50 plus 1. So to me, and I think regardless of whether you're legally allowed to do a lease purchase, you're going to end up with people there that are like, well, they couldn't get it the other way, so they're going to get this way. Oh, they want a huge elementary school? Forget about it. So I honestly think that it's a mistake to go lease purchase, quite frankly. And I hope that the school board reconsiders. Because I believe you'd have very good support for a bond. But I think you're going to have people raising their eyebrows, asking the question, why is this not a bond? Because buildings in town get built with bonds.
Carrie, we're not building a building though. I think it's really important that, if we were to replace the middle school today, you'd be looking at a bond of $45 million, right? We're not doing that. What we're doing is taking a 40-year-old building with aging equipment. You have a ventilation system that doesn't operate. We've updated the windows. I don't think there are too many 40-year-old houses in town that still have the original windows. I mean, everybody understands that you need
172
to invest in the building. And so, this is allowing us to make those investments. And keep in mind the roof and the lighting upgrades that we did this summer, plus the window upgrades that we did, the insulation work that we did all of that without asking for taxpayer dollars. So we've already begun this work. And in the long run, it's going to save everybody money. You're not going to have budgets coming forward with energy cost increases of 3 to 7% in the future, because we will be generating the electricity for everything on the roof and we'll be paying it back. You're still going to have to pay for that energy, but you're doing it through the lease purchase agreement. So it stabilizes things significantly and it gets the school updated. The overall value of this is we end up with a completely renovated, everything has been upgraded, energy efficient building. I'll point out, if you haven't seen the COVID numbers, our middle school numbers have been among the highest, or have been the highest in our district, because the ventilation system really is not adequate. So, this will put in place air source heat pumps and ventilation that will bring in 100% fresh air. We don't have that currently. We'll have MERV 13 filters on the system. We don't have that currently. We're going to improve the health and safety of all our students and all our staff through this project. And we're utilizing the cost savings in the energy upgrades in order to do it. So it really is a very conscientious and budget responsible way to get the building buttoned up. And we feel that the voters will see the wisdom of that and are confident that they will support this warrant.
Well,
And we'd like to have the budget committee embrace that and understand that, you know, the middle school has not been touched. We've done significant things there and we have more to do. You know, having the portables removed, they were just, in my opinion, an eyesore sitting out front. We needed to take some action down there and we've done it. This board has been incredibly supportive and very clear to Corey and I about what we need to do in order to get that building upgraded. And I think we're delivering a very responsible plan on how to do it without having a large tax increase.
And well,
Dr. Jody, what about maintenance costs, right? And so when I think about the solar array and the battery backups that go with that system, you know, the battery backup part is likely very expensive. I don't know the exact dollars, but you know, if the investors back out or if we take over control after year 5 or year 6, I forget exactly what was presented. That's generally the time frame where we're starting to think about maintenance and replacement of very expensive parts of these systems. Where is that factored into this equation?
So we have that would have to be built into a future operating budget. You are correct. But you know, for example, if you take the solar array itself, there really aren't maintenance costs on those. The solar cells are good for 20 years before they begin to decline. And then they're still darn good up to 30 years and beyond. So there's really not, I mean, if you compare the maintenance costs of moving parts like an oil-fired burner versus a solar cell, it really doesn't compare. So there may be some smaller incremental amounts. And I think you're right. I think the battery backup system, I can see that there's more of an electronic component that would need to be factored in. But again, that would be something like a computer system that's failed. And then again, we have the expendable trust fund to help cover a failure like that. And it's not going to be anywhere near as significant as the failure of the electrical system at Griffin. I mean, it was $35,000 for one switch at Griffin.
I think we need to check.
I don't think that we're looking at that kind of a cost relative to maintenance of this system.
Could we get
Not
some
in 5
information
years.
on that? Because I remember reading the article about a guy blowing up his Tesla because it cost $22,000 to replace that battery. And so I would imagine that this would be a little more expensive than replacing a Tesla car battery. So if we have an idea as to what we would be putting ourselves on the hook for in, say, years 5 through 10, I would be more comfortable with my decision. But back to the other comments, I don't think anybody has argued about the need for this project. My objections are primarily associated with the financing decisions. And yes, you're entitled to take the risks you like. I don't argue that this is a good idea as a project and scope. I am very, very concerned about the funding mechanism. So,
You know, one thing to point out too, just since we've begun this project, 2 things have happened. One is that the actual costs of the solar cells, for example, has dropped. I mean, they are becoming more efficient. The battery backup systems, those are becoming less costly over time also. In fact, the type of system that's being proposed is kind of one of those quantum leap systems that is really a pretty significant increase in both its storage capacity and the cost to purchase it. So the point being that I don't know what it's like to replace a battery in an old Tesla. I just know that in the future, you know, these things are continuing to evolve and the price of them is shifting. So, you know, it's hard to paint the picture of what it's going to look like down the road when we've seen significant decreases in this sort of technology. And it's becoming more mainstream. You know, if this feels or sounds unusual, you know, for example, the brand new Oyster River Middle School, utilizes all of this technology. It's all incorporated in there. So both capacity of vendors in New Hampshire to service and to maintain these is really increasing, and the number of people in the market is increasing, which is going to drive costs down. So it will, we think, can be beneficial for everybody down the road.
Okay. You have
Yeah, couple of things in relation to what you said, and the people of the town, this town, have always been very gracious when it comes to needs, and I think not a lot of this, but some of this is wants. The solar array is a want. It's not really a need. We've survived for years on electric and oil, and we still will. And I think if you pared it down somewhat to actually what is really needed and not just, a shopping list for what we may want, I think that might be more palatable to the people. And the second thing is you were talking about the ventilation systems at the middle school and the COVID numbers being through the roof. And I think part of the lead to that, which is a discussion for another day, is the fact that we're allowing vaccinated people who have been exposed to the virus to be in the school, and they're spreading it. So that's a big portion of what's going on in the schools, in my opinion. So it's not just the ventilation system, it's also the policy that's allowing this to occur.
So that is not a policy of the school board. That's the New Hampshire DHHS rules. So
Correct.
we're following what our medical professionals are saying is the best practice.
But you can make your own policy.
Can we
And
discuss that at a school board meeting?
Say again?
I said, but you can make your own policy. Matter of fact, I believe the town is going to discuss that on Monday on our end.
Sounds good.
So you can do what you want to do. You don't have to follow the state. But because
I think
Okay.
it was brought up, I just thought I'd.
I think it's important to respond to that, though. If your premise was accurate, then you would have the same numbers at both Griffin and at the high school, because we're following the same policy. The fact is, you have double the numbers at the middle school, which says something else is going on.
There's a lot going on everywhere.
Whether it's school related or kids hanging out after school without masks on, we don't know the cause, but we do know that we would improve the system.
I do have a question that's sort of related because this is a planning question.
Go for it.
The capital improvement plan, we had it in here for energy efficiency projects at LMS and CHS, both of which total were supposed to cost $2.5 million. So has this project scope increased to include the ventilation? And are you still planning on doing CHS in, a year or two?
I'm sorry, Kate, you're looking at the capital improvement plan?
Yep. And I know that's, it's a year or two old now. And I know the committee hasn't met, but I just don't understand where the difference comes from 1.3 million to 5 million.
So we were making estimates on what it was going to cost. We were using the Turner, was it the Turner report that was done several years ago? That's where we carved those numbers out of. And frankly, the Turner report was, I don't know how accurate their numbers were, but that's how we came. The numbers that are in the capital plan came from the Turner report.
And did
Remember,
they not
those
include...
numbers are also now 6 years old, and we have no idea how accurate they were at the time. So,
And they didn't include
think
ventilation projects, is that right? It did include ventilation
The
projects?
primary part of the HL Turner was mechanical, electrical. Those were the lion's share.
And ventilation's already been started, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't you already start
The
on some ventilation?
ventilation?
Yes. HVAC?
We have fixed what we can fix,
Yep.
but the entire system needs to be replaced.
So are you still planning to bring forward this same sort of project at Campbell in a few years?
Mike, did you hear
Can you hear
Kate's
me?
question?
No, I froze up and I'm.
Kate, pull your mic a little closer.
Are you still planning on doing this similar project at CHS in a few years?
No, I don't believe so.
Is that freezing?
Maybe Tina can answer that one.
Yeah, I don't
No, I
believe.
see him moving. Mr. Sun's moving.
Yeah, Mike is frozen though.
Yeah, Ms. Harrison, correct me if I'm wrong, or Mr. Zwicky. I was thinking the CHS work was mostly complete
It
from a
is.
ventilation
Right.
standpoint.
We were able to
In
leverage.
terms of ventilation and controls, majority of that has been completed. So any additional projects would be down the road to consider. Our priority is really the LMS project and the potential GMS bond.
Okay.
Okay.
So I had one last question. With the battery packs and the major solar arrays, have we reviewed with the fire department their ability to, how they would handle or have the ability to handle an event at the building? Just, I know that when solar panels first came out, my husband's cousin was all, yeah, we don't respond to fires with solar panels on them because they didn't have shutoffs. It was too dangerous to pour water on a continued electrical source. So yeah. So the question would be, have we consulted with the fire department? Are we going to need new equipment or training or anything else to be able to address any issues that could occur at?
Can I kind of respond to that? I think we're getting into the weeds a
Well,
lot on this, but what's important to remember is that this is not a new concept that schools are just now undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
This has been happening in New England for years and years and years.
Sure.
We're catching up at this point. And the reason that we are invested in this idea of a solar array is to save taxpayer money down the line.
Sure. Save money on electric. But
So-
do I need to invest in additional equipment elsewhere in town?
I would assume that other towns and other schools that have done this have done that legwork, and that our consultants that we've been working very closely with would have informed us of that kind of additional expense to the town.
Our plans will also, because there's a ESSER fund portion of it, our plans will be reviewed by the state fire marshal, which will work hand in hand with our local fire department.
So we're not sure if we need additional equipment. Got it. All right.
Carrie,
I just
that's
have one
not
question.
what was said though, just to be fair. There are plenty of homes in town with solar arrays identical to what we're proposing. And, I have not heard that raised as an issue before, so I'm not sure why this array causes that to become a question. But we'll ask that question, we'll try to get an answer to it.
I would feel
But,
better knowing if our fire department is appropriately geared for a array of that size with a battery system of that size. It's not an unreasonable question. It's not bad practice to know what one investment might cause the need for another investment. I'm sorry that is, if other schools have done it, yes, you should already be able to find that answer. So the answer will be like, Carrie, we don't need any more
And we'll
investment.
ask, I'm just saying, when I drive up and down Albuquerque, I see solar arrays, so, I'll certainly pose that question.
I would appreciate it. So that brings us back to Article 6, because we've lost.
I do have one question.
Yes, please.
Do we need to consider any tax cap ramifications for school warrant articles?
No, we do not have a tax cap on the school side.
Thank you. Then I'd like to make a recommendation to go to a vote.
All right. Are you recommending the warrant article? Or just calling the question?
Just looking to end discussion.
All right, so I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve Article 6.
Mr. Barca is to approve, recommend. And is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Sorry. All right, so who seconded? Mr. Sun? All right, so it's been made and seconded. Mrs. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
No.
I'm a no. Mrs. Stevens? Ms. Stevens?
I think I have to say no on this. I think if it could be split between solar and renovations, maybe that'd be different.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Mr. Cutter?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
No.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
No.
So that's the recommendation. This will be not recommended by the Budget Committee by a vote of 6-3 or 3-6. So we still have the budget hearing. Changes can be made, things can be addressed. We can take a look at it again. This moves us on to Article 7.
I'd like to request that if you do request more information about the project and contingencies and things like that, that might sway your vote in another direction, I would encourage you to reach out to the superintendent.
I've been very clear about.
Oh, I know why you voted no.
So any other questions that people may have, please direct them to Chairman Cutter so that the school board could take the feedback. So Article 7, shall the school district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $125,000 to be added to the Capital Improvements Expendable Trust Fund established in 2020 for the purpose of funding the study, planning, and cost of new construction or renovation of existing facilities in the Litchfield School District. This sum to come from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for the transfer on July 1st of this year with no amount to be raised from taxation. This amount is consistent with the capital plan adopted by the town of Litchfield in September 2020. Estimated tax impact is $0, recommended by the school by a vote of 5-0-0. Discussion?
So if you remember when we saw this last, there were two options.
Mhm.
Option one was to fund this additional money toward, and at this point it's toward the Griffin project. And the option one was to take it out of fund balance at the end of the year. Option two was to raise and appropriate an additional. The board selected to go with option one. So that's the zero tax impact option. And this will actually be the third time that we've asked the voters to weigh in on the value of that project. I think we're doing a good job of engaging the community more actively around what we envision and getting community input into that project. We have a third session scheduled to come up on Tuesday, January 18th. So the board is choosing to put another 125 toward it out of this year's fund balance, if it's available, and we assume it will be.
Discussion?
Yeah, is this money going towards a new Griffin or towards renovations of Griffin?
At this point, what the committee is recommending, or what the board is leaning toward, based on the feedback that we've received, is a new building somewhere other than the current site.
Okay. Because I'm a big proponent of renovating Griffin. I'll say that out front. I know it's going to be a healthy price tag, but it's going to be a lot less than $30 million or $32 million for a new school.
The thing I struggle with on is I agree that whatever plan is going to have renovation of existing facilities. I don't support a new Griffin, but by voting yes, I'm saying it comes back to, well, you voted for a new Griffin. I'm like, but that's not what it says.
That's not what that article is. This is for
Right, but we sat here
capital improvements.
Last meeting, we said people have voted for a new Griffin. That's what that article says. And my saying is that is not what that article says. By voting
We never said that, Carrie. What we said is people voted for what the article says, which is to new construction or renovation. And so the feedback, we spent 2 years studying this, and the feedback and looking at the overall costs, the issues that exist with that piece of property, and the direction that this is taking is that we need to not be on that piece of property, because the moisture issues there are not going to resolve. They're going to last. They're just going to continue. And so where it has now headed is toward a new building on another piece of property.
And is that why we are asking for more money to be raised and appropriated for studies and planning?
Yeah, and it's not really studies. I think that's been studied almost to death at this point. It's really for the planning, to have the money available to us for the planning that we need to do.
Yeah, my initial thought going into this was I wasn't going to support it because we've already supported for a couple of years now the planning and studies and et cetera. But if this is because it's required for a new parcel, then that makes more sense to me.
It's also the cost of architectural designs. I mean, it's not a inexpensive process to have the construction documents compiled and put together. So there's going to be quite a bit of cost associated with working with Kyle Barker and his team.
When
do
you
think
came,
it's really important for community members, elected officials, everybody, to attend one of the reimagining sessions. I know there's another one coming up in January, and I'm sure Dr. Jetty or Ms. Harrison can provide that. You know, I've seen false information being shared on social media from state elected officials about plans and why aren't we leveraging plans. And I think, you know, this group has seen and heard that those plans simply aren't usable. They were done for, they were created for a school that was twice what we need in a plot of land that simply isn't where we want to build a new school or renovate a school for that point, based on the studies that have been done with the money that was approved last year. And so I think being a part of those active conversations for every citizen of Litchfield is really important to understand the impact of this money and what potentially comes down the road.
And to clarify that point, the plans that existed were nothing more than boxes on a piece of paper. They were never anything beyond that. So the amount of work, even if we said, okay, we want the boxes exactly where they were then, the amount of work done to turn that picture into a building is a significant investment. So I don't know why people, you know, because they remember seeing the picture, right? I mean, I have the video of when it was presented to the town back in the early 2000s. But again, it's just a conceptual picture only. There were no mechanicals, there were no site drawings that were done to like a civil engineering standard. It was, hey, the school looking like this would be sited over here. But boy, there is so much to turn that into an actual building. Not even close.
I'd like to call the vote.
Sure.
Yeah, that me too.
Motion to, I'm sorry, what?
I would just like to say that you came to our meeting a couple weeks ago, and Mr. Lynch, who is very much an expert in these areas, stated that there are ways to mitigate the moisture issue.
Okay.
Okay, so I would just like that stated as well. There,
To
anything that's
that
wrong
point,
with Griffin can
Mr.
be
Leary,
fixed.
our architect said he doesn't know what he's talking about, to be fair. They heard the comments about putting a vapor barrier under the slab, and he said, you can't do it. You have to tear the entire slab out. They were like, it's not something that can be done. We're talking about a school building. So
Have your architect call
it
Mr.
depends, I guess, on which
Before we
experts
start
you wanna
devolving
listen to.
into questioning people's abilities in town, let's just
So-
talk to the vote. So is there a motion to recommend?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Cutter, is there a
Second.
second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Harrison beat you to it. All right, Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
I'm a no. Mrs. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
No.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right, so that is recommended by a vote of 6-3. All right, I believe we made it to the end. Find my agenda, see what's up next. All right, so final voting. So thank you very much, school, for your budget presentations and the information presented tonight. We will have to vote on the contracts after the budget hearing next week. But that brings us to member input, new business. Does anybody have anything?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for taking the lead on tonight's meeting.
You're very welcome. You're welcome to have it back next week. Hope you're feeling better. So any other member input or new business?
Public hearing on zoning amendments on Wednesday, 7
Next
PM.
week, right?
Yep. Seems like there's a slew of them, so hopefully. Any other public input, new business? Hearing none. Is there, I see no public here. Is there, I don't see any online. Hearing none. No public input, so therefore entertain a
Motion to
motion.
adjourn?
So
moved.
made and
Second.
seconded by Mr. Leary. Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Barca,
Yes.
Mr. Cutter,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Sun,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
All right, unanimously agreed. At least we finished on a high note. Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Budget hearing next Thursday. I believe locations at the high school,
CHS Auditorium, 7 PM.
7 p.m. Hope to see you there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.